I was standing in the back of my sister's wedding reception when my father raised his champagne glass and said the words that would change everything. "We wish your sister was our only child." The room erupted in awkward laughter. My mother looked away. My sister Noreen smirked at me across the ballroom. "You'll always be the family failure, Evelyn." I smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. You see, 15 years ago, I left home with nothing but $200 and a suitcase after my family told me I'd never amount to anything. They hid my Harvard acceptance letter. They paid my boyfriend to dump me. They erased me from their lives like I never existed. But tonight, the groom this man about to marry my perfect sister was about to reveal a secret that would shatter their entire world. When he stood up, his hands were shaking. When he looked at me in the back row, his eyes were filled with something between guilt and desperation. And when he spoke into that microphone, everything my family thought they knew exploded into 1,000 pieces. "It's an honor," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room, "to have my boss here tonight." Every head turned, every eye found me, and their smiles died on their faces. Because I wasn't the failure. I was the CEO who owned the venue. I funded their wedding, and I was about to expose every lie they ever told. This is the story of how the daughter they threw away became the woman they could never escape. And trust me, you won't believe what happens next. My name is Evelyn Cole. I'm 38 years old, and on paper I'm the CEO of a $50 million logistics company. But today, walking through the gilded doors of the Ashford estate, I'm just the daughter who disappeared 15 years ago, returning to a family that wishes I hadn't. The moment I step inside, I feel it. That familiar tightening in my chest, the one that takes me right back to being 18 years old packing a suitcase with trembling hands while my father's words echoed through the house. "You'll never be anything without us." I proved him wrong. I built an empire from nothing. But standing here now in my simple navy dress among women dripping in diamonds and designer labels, I feel like that scared girl all over again. The venue is breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers catch the afternoon sunlight, sending prismatic rainbows dancing across marble floors. Ice sculptures in the shape of swans flank the entrance. A string quartet plays softly near towering arrangements of white roses and peonies. This wedding must have cost a fortune. I make a mental note of the venue name on the discreet brass plaque by the door, though I'm not sure why. Something about it tugs at my memory. "Isn't that the forgotten one?" a woman in a peach fascinator whispers to her companion as I pass. "I thought she ran away." "I heard she became a waitress or something," another voice murmurs. "Such a shame for the family." I keep my face neutral, my posture straight. 15 years of boardroom negotiations taught me how to hide what I'm feeling. I spot my mother across the room, Margaret Cole, 65 and still beautiful in an ice queen sort of way. Her silver hair is perfectly coiffed, her champagne-colored dress impeccable. When our eyes meet, she gives me the briefest of nods, the kind you'd give a distant acquaintance you're obligated to acknowledge. Then she turns away, her jaw visibly tightening. My father Richard stands near the bar holding court with a group of men in expensive suits. He's 67 now, grayer than I remember, but still commanding attention with that booming voice. He sees me. I know he does. But he doesn't even pause, his conversation doesn't break his smile. It's as if I'm invisible. Then I see her. Noreen. My baby sister, though, at 35, she's hardly a baby anymore. She's radiant in a wedding gown that probably cost more than most people's cars, all lace and crystal beading that catches the light with every movement. When she spots me, her expression does something strange. For just a moment, I see something in her eyes that isn't the disdain I expected. It looks almost like pain, almost like guilt. But then she lifts her chin and turns away, and the moment is gone. I find my assigned seat, last row, partially hidden behind a decorative column, of course. As I sit down, I notice an elegant elderly woman a few rows ahead. She must be 90 if she's a day, but she sits with perfect posture dressed in a dove-gray silk suit with pearls at her throat. There's something regal about her, something that speaks of old money and older wisdom. She turns and looks directly at me, and her eyes, sharp and knowing, hold mine for a long moment. She smiles not with pity, but with what looks oddly like pride, and mouths words I can barely make out. "Welcome home, child." I don't know this woman. I'm certain we've never met. But something about the way she's looking at me makes my throat tight with unexpected emotion. The cocktail hour continues, champagne flowing freely, guests mingling and laughing. I stay in my corner trying to be invisible, trying to remember why I came. Closure, I told myself, just closure. A chance to see them one last time and finally let go. Then my father's voice cuts through the pleasant buzz of conversation. "May I have everyone's attention?" Richard raises his glass and the room quiets. "I'd like to make a toast to my daughter, my beautiful Noreen." I watch him, this man who raised me, this man I once desperately wanted to love me. "Today is a celebration of perfection." He continues, his voice warm and proud in a way it never was for me. "My Noreen has always been everything a father could hope for. Beautiful, graceful, a true credit to our family." He pauses, and I see the shift in his expression. "I've learned in life that some children are blessings and some are lessons." The words hang in the air. Several guests glance uncomfortably in my direction. "Thankfully," Richard's voice hardens almost imperceptibly, "Noreen is a blessing in every way, which is why I say this with all my heart. I only wish she was our only child." The silence that follows is deafening. Then nervous laughter ripples through the crowd. My mother stares at her champagne flute. Noreen's smile falters, her eyes glistening. But my father. He looks right at me, and there's no mistaking the cruelty in his eyes. My hands are shaking. I hide them in my lap, forcing my face to remain calm. I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not here, not now, not ever again. But then I notice something else. The groom, James Mitchell, isn't laughing. He's staring at me with an expression I can't quite read. It's not contempt. It's not amusement. It's something closer to fear. Guilt. His face has gone pale, and he keeps glancing between me and my father, his collar suddenly seeming too tight. He tugs at it, loosening his tie. Noreen notices. She grabs his arm, leaning close to whisper something sharp in his ear. But James doesn't seem to hear her. He's still staring at me, and now I see his hands are trembling too. The elderly woman in gray is watching the whole scene with those knowing eyes, and when she catches my gaze again, she gives the smallest shake of her head, as if to say, "Just wait." The ceremony is about to begin. Guests are being ushered to their seats. I should leave. I should walk out right now and never look back. But something keeps me frozen in place. Some instinct I can't name tells me that I need to stay, that something is about to happen, something that will change everything. The crowd laughed and raised their glasses, but the groom's eyes told a different story, one that would unravel everything by midnight. Sitting in that back row, invisible once again, my father's words echoing in my ears, I find my mind drifting backward. It's a defense mechanism I learned young when the present becomes unbearable retreat into memory. Not because the past was better, but because at least in memory I can observe it from a distance, like watching someone else's tragedy unfold. I was 5 years old the first time I understood I was different. Wrong somehow. Noreen was 2 and already the family favorite. I remember sitting at the kitchen table carefully coloring inside the lines of my coloring book, so proud of myself for not going over the edges. My mother walked by, glanced down, and said nothing. Then Noreen toddled over with her scribbles, wild, chaotic marks all over the page, and my mother swept her up, laughing. "Look at you, my little artist, so creative, so free." I looked down at my perfect lines and felt the first stirring of a question I'd spend the next 30 years trying to answer. What was wrong with me? By the time I started school, the pattern was set. I brought home perfect test scores, honor roll certificates, academic achievement awards. My father would glance at them and grunt. "Book smarts won't make you happy, Evelyn. Your sister has charm. That's what matters in this world." My mother would barely look up from whatever she was doing. But when Noreen came home with a macaroni necklace she'd made in art class, they'd display it like it was the Mona Lisa praising her creativity, her warm heart, her special light. I learned to stop showing them my achievements. I'd tuck my report cards into my desk drawer unshared. I'd win spelling bees and debate competitions and never mention them at dinner. What was the point? They weren't looking for excellence in me. They were looking for reasons to prefer her, and everything I did, every accomplishment, every attempt to earn their love, only seemed to make them love her more. At family gatherings, I became a ghost. Relatives would swoop in, exclaiming over Noreen's pretty dress, her cute smile, how she lit up a room. "And this is Evelyn," someone would say, as an afterthought, barely glancing my way before turning back to my sister. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter. I'd find a corner with a book and disappear into stories about children who were seen, who were valued, who mattered. Fiction became my refuge, because reality was unbearable. "Why are you so serious all the time?" My mother would ask, irritation sharp in her voice. "Why can't you be charming like your sister? Why can't you smile more, talk more, be more approachable?" The irony was crushing. They'd created my quietness by ignoring me, and then they punished me for it, using it as proof that something was fundamentally wrong with me. I became the quiet child, the serious one, the difficult daughter. These labels stuck to me like wet leaves, impossible to shake off. But my mother's treatment was the most confusing, the most painful. There was a complexity to her coldness that I couldn't understand as a child. She wasn't just indifferent, she seemed almost angry at me, but for what I didn't know. Sometimes she'd look at me with this strange expression, like she was seeing someone else, someone who made her deeply uncomfortable. I remember the day I turned 16. I'd worked so hard that semester, pushing myself to get straight A's in all honors classes. When I showed my mother my report card, I was still young enough, still naive enough to hope for praise. She stared at it for a long moment, and I watched something dark pass over her face. "I was smart too once," she said, her voice bitter and cold. "Look where it got me, trapped in this life, playing the perfect wife, watching my brain rot from disuse." I stood there confused and hurt. "But Mom," I thought, "you think too much, Evelyn. That's your problem. All that intelligence, and you have no idea how the world really works." She handed the report card back to me without another word and walked away. Another time, I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, absorbed in a calculus problem. She stood in the doorway watching me, and when I looked up, the expression on her face made me freeze. "You were born old, Evelyn," she said quietly. "Even as a baby, you had this ancient look in your eyes. No wonder no one understands you. You don't even belong in this time, this place." I didn't know what to say. Was she insulting me, warning me? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that the way she looked at me made me feel like I was something alien, something that didn't fit, something that reminded her of something painful she couldn't face. My father was different. His rejection was colder, more calculated. He simply acted as if I barely existed. He'd talk to Noreen, ask about her day, her friends, her interests. When I tried to join the conversation, his attention would drift away like I was wallpaper. But sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch him staring at me with the strangest expression, not quite anger, not quite sadness. Something closer to confusion, or maybe resentment. "You don't look anything like me," he muttered once when I was about 12. We were at a family reunion, and someone had commented on how Noreen had his eyes. He looked at me and said it under his breath, almost to himself. I didn't understand what he meant. I just knew it felt like an accusation, like even my appearance was somehow my fault. But the worst moment, the one that nearly broke me, came when I was 16. It was April 2003, and I'd applied to Harvard on a whim, not really believing I'd get in. My mother had gone to Harvard. It was one of the few things I knew about her past, though she never talked about it. When the acceptance letter came, I saw it in the mail stack on the hall table. My name, the Harvard seal. My hands shook as I reached for it. But before I could grab it, my mother appeared. She moved so quickly, snatching the letter from the pile. "I'll take care of the mail," she said, her voice strange tight. "But that's for me," I said, confused. "I saw the Harvard seal." "You're seeing things," she said, already walking away. "There's nothing here for you." Days passed, then weeks. I kept checking the mail obsessively, waiting for the letter I'd seen with my own eyes. Finally, I asked my parents directly, "Did anything come from Harvard?" My father looked at me with something almost like pity. "You were rejected, Evelyn. I'm sorry, but maybe college isn't for you anyway. Not everyone is meant for higher education." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd seen that letter. I'd seen the Harvard seal. But they were telling me I was wrong, that I'd imagined it, that I wasn't good enough. And I believed them. That's the insidious thing about being gaslit your entire childhood. You stop trusting your own perception of reality. I retreated into myself after that, the last hope of proving my worth extinguished. If I couldn't even get into college, what was I? They were right. I was nothing. I was the failure they'd always said I was. I didn't know then that someone in that house had stolen my future, had hidden that letter, and constructed a lie to keep me small and manageable. I didn't know that my mother had her own reasons for crushing my dreams, reasons that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with her own buried regrets. That stolen letter would return years later, but not from the hands she expected. 2 years after that rejection, that wasn't really a rejection, I turned 18 and made the decision that would save my life. I was going to leave. Not for college, since I'd failed to get in anywhere that mattered, but just to leave. To breathe. To exist somewhere where every moment wasn't a reminder of my inadequacy. I'd been saving money from a part-time job at the library, hiding cash in an old shoebox under my bed like some kind of runaway in a melodrama. $200. That's all I had. But it was enough to buy a bus ticket and maybe a few nights in a cheap motel while I figured things out. I didn't have a plan beyond anywhere but here. The night before I intended to leave, my boyfriend Daniel came over. He was my first real boyfriend, the first person outside my family who seemed to actually see me. We'd been together for 6 months, and I'd confided in him about my plans. I thought he'd be supportive, maybe even proud of me for finally standing up for myself. Instead, he sat on the porch swing, unable to meet my eyes, and said the words that nearly destroyed me. "I can't do this anymore, Evelyn. You're too much, too serious, too intense, too difficult. I need someone lighter, someone fun." The words were so similar to things I'd heard my whole life that they felt rehearsed. But I was too heartbroken to notice the inconsistency. Daniel had told me just days before that he loved me, that he'd wait for me, that we'd figure out the distance together. Now he couldn't even look at me. "I'm sorry," he said, standing up to leave. "I hope you find what you're looking for." I watched him walk away, and something inside me cracked. This was it then. Proof that my family was right. I was unlovable. Too broken even for someone my own age to tolerate. I cried for hours that night, sitting on my bedroom floor, wondering if I should just stay. If I should just accept that this was my life, that I was meant to be, invisible and unloved and small. But then dawn came, and with it a strange clarity. Daniel's rejection hurt, but it also freed me. I had nothing left to lose. No relationship tying me here. No hope of family reconciliation. No future I was giving up. I was already at the bottom. The only way forward was up. I packed my suitcase, took my $200, and left a note on the kitchen table. "I'll prove I'm worth something, even if it's not to you." Years later, I'd learned the truth about that breakup. My father had paid Daniel $5,000 to dump me, hoping the heartbreak would make me too weak to leave, too desperate to agree to whatever future he had planned, probably some arranged marriage to another wealthy family's son, a transaction to preserve the Cole family honor. But Richard had miscalculated. His cruelty didn't break me. It forged me. I didn't know any of that then. I just knew I was leaving, and I wasn't coming back. The first few weeks were brutal. I crashed on a friend's couch until I wore out my welcome, then moved to a youth hostel that smelled like mildew and desperation. I applied for every job I could find: waitress, retail clerk, receptionist. Most places took one look at me, 18, no college degree, no references, and sent me away with a tight smile and false promises to keep your resume on file. I was sitting in a coffee shop one afternoon spreading out classified ads and job applications across a wobbly table, trying to make a single cup of coffee last 3 hours. My funds were dwindling fast. I had maybe 2 weeks before I'd be completely broke, and then what go crawling back home. The thought made me physically ill. That's when he walked in. A distinguished older man, maybe mid-40s, with silver at his temples and an expensive suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. He ordered a black coffee and sat down at the table next to mine. I tried to ignore him, focusing on circling job listings with my pen. Then he reached for his briefcase and knocked it against my table. Papers flew everywhere, my applications, my resume, everything scattering across the coffee shop floor. "I'm so sorry," he said, immediately getting down to help me gather everything. How clumsy of me. "It's fine," I muttered, scrambling to collect my scattered dreams before other customers stepped on them. He handed me a stack of papers, but I noticed he was reading my resume as he did. "Evelyn Cole," he said, and something flickered across his face. His eyes met mine, and for just a second I saw something I couldn't identify: surprise, recognition, pain. But then it was gone, replaced by a warm, professional smile. "Are you looking for work?" he asked. Desperately, I admitted before I could stop myself. He studied me for a moment, his gaze intense but not unkind. "You seem like someone who doesn't give up easily," he said. "I'm Wallace Cole. I run a logistics company, and I'm looking for a dedicated assistant. Someone smart, someone willing to learn, someone who has something to prove." The name registered Cole like mine, but I was too focused on the word job to think about the coincidence. "I'm all of those things," I said, meeting his eyes with what I hoped looked like confidence rather than desperation. "I believe you are," he said. "Can you start Monday?" That was it. No formal interview, no reference checks, no suspicious questions about why an 18-year-old had no college plans. Just an offer extended like a lifeline at exactly the moment I needed it most. What I didn't know, couldn't possibly have known, was that Wallace Cole had been watching me for weeks. He'd known exactly where to find me, exactly when to stage his accidental collision. He'd orchestrated our meeting as carefully as a conductor leading a symphony. But I didn't question it. I was just grateful. Wallace became more than a boss over the next 5 years. He became the father I'd never had, teaching me not just the mechanics of business, but the philosophy behind success. "Grace is not weakness, Evelyn," he'd tell me when I wanted to lash out at difficult clients or unfair situations. "It's the strongest weapon you'll ever have. Let them underestimate you. Let them dismiss you. Then prove them devastatingly wrong." He taught me negotiation tactics, how to read body language, how to turn every setback into an opportunity. But more than that, he believed in me in a way no one ever had. He saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. The strange thing was how invested he seemed. He'd introduce me to key contacts in the industry, people who would have never given a 19-year-old without a college degree a second glance. Somehow I'd land contracts that should have gone to more established companies. Opportunities would appear at exactly the right moment, as if someone was orchestrating them from behind the scenes. "Why are you doing all this for me?" I asked him once after he'd connected me with a mentor who helped me start my own small operation. Wallace smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that carries years of regret. "You remind me of someone I lost long ago," he said quietly. "Someone I couldn't help when they needed me. Maybe this is my chance to make that right." I should have asked more, should have pushed for details. Who did I remind him of? What had happened to them? Why did he sometimes look at me with such profound sadness mixed with pride? But I was young and overwhelmed and grateful, and I didn't want to risk this gift by asking too many questions. So I just worked harder trying to prove myself worthy of his faith in me. He said I reminded him of someone. I never asked who a mistake I'd regret for the rest of my life. By the time I turned 23, I'd learned everything Wallace could teach me about the logistics industry. I'd spent 5 years as his assistant, then his operations manager, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. I knew supply chains, freight forwarding, warehouse management, customs regulations. I knew how to read a balance sheet and spot inefficiencies in a distribution network from a mile away. More importantly, I'd learned how to navigate a world that didn't want women at the table. Wallace called me into his office one morning in early 2010 and said something that changed my life. "You're ready, Evelyn. Time to build your own empire." I looked at him startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've learned everything I can teach you. Now you need to go prove it to the world." He slid a business card across his desk. It was blank except for a phone number. "My lawyer. He'll help you set up your LLC, and I'm investing $50,000 as seed capital." "Wallace, I can't." "You can and you will. Call it a loan if it makes you feel better. Pay me back when you're successful." He smiled that sad smile I'd come to recognize. "I believe in you, Evelyn. Now you need to believe in yourself." That's how Cole Logistics was born. I chose the name deliberately, my name, the one thing my family couldn't take from me. If I was going to fail, I'd fail as myself. And if I succeeded, it would be undeniably mine. The first year nearly killed me. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I couldn't afford to hire many employees, so I did everything myself. I loaded trucks at 4 in the morning, ran deliveries, handled customer service calls, managed invoicing, and spent nights hunched over spreadsheets trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. My apartment was a studio with a mattress on the floor and a coffee maker that was my most prized possession. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I wore the same 3 business outfits on rotation, dry cleaning them myself in the sink. But slowly, painfully, the company grew. I landed small contracts with local businesses, then slightly bigger ones. I built a reputation for reliability and efficiency. I was never the cheapest option, but I was the best, and I made sure every client knew it. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was the constant dismissal. The logistics industry was and still is dominated by men. Men who'd been in the business for decades, who'd learned it from their fathers who saw a young woman and immediately assumed she was someone's secretary or mistress or diversity hire. I remember one meeting in particular. I was 25 trying to land a contract with a mid-sized manufacturing company. I'd spent weeks preparing a detailed proposal, analyzing their distribution networks, and showing exactly how much money I could save them annually. I walked into the conference room in my best suit, carrying my presentation materials, and the CEO barely glanced at me before looking around the room. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Why don't you get your boss? We don't have time for the secretary to sit in on this meeting." Every woman in business has had this moment. The moment when you have a choice, shrink away or stand your ground. I'd spent my childhood shrinking. I was done with that. "I am the boss," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on the table. "I'm Evelyn Cole, CEO of Cole Logistics, and based on the analysis I've done of your shipping patterns over the last 18 months, I'd estimate you're losing approximately $300,000 annually due to inefficient routing and poor vendor relationships." His face went red. "That's impossible." I pulled out my analysis and walked him through it line by line: shipment delays, redundant routes, overpayment to carriers who were taking advantage of his logistics manager's incompetence. I had the data, the facts, the solutions. By the end of my presentation, he was pale. "How did you—" he started. "Public shipping records, industry connections, and basic mathematics." I said, "I can cut your logistics costs by 20% in the first year, guaranteed. Or you can keep doing business the way you've always done it and keep losing money. I won the contract. And that became my pattern. Let them underestimate me. Let them think I'm too young, too female, too inexperienced. Then present facts so devastating, analysis so thorough that they have no choice but to take me seriously. Wallace taught me that. Grace is not weakness, he'd say. Let them reveal their biases, then use those biases against them. The sweeter you smile while proving them wrong, the more powerful you become. The real turning point came in 2012. I was 25 and my company was stable but not spectacular. Then I got a call from a Fortune 500 company, a major retail corporation, looking to completely overhaul their distribution system. It was the kind of contract that could make or break a company like mine. The kind of contract that companies with 10 times my resources were competing for. I almost didn't bid on it. It felt too big, too risky. But Wallace encouraged me. "You're ready for this, Evelyn. Trust yourself." I threw everything into that proposal. Weeks of research, modeling, contingency planning. When I presented to their board, I knew I'd done everything perfectly. But I still didn't expect to win. When they called to tell me I'd gotten the contract, I nearly dropped the phone. "How?" I asked the procurement director. "I mean, thank you, but I have to ask, how did I beat companies 20 times my size?" "Wallace Cole vouched for you," he said. "He called our CEO personally and said you were the sharpest mind in logistics he'd ever encountered. That kind of recommendation carries weight. Of course, your proposal was exceptional on its own merits. We just needed that extra push to take a chance on a smaller firm." I hung up, stunned. Wallace had recommended me. He'd never mentioned it. When I called to thank him, he brushed it off. "I might have mentioned your name in passing," he said. "But you won that contract on merit, Evelyn. Don't ever doubt that. I just opened the door. You walked through it." I believed him then. I believed the success was mine, earned through hard work and talent. And in a way it was. But I didn't know yet how many other doors Wallace had quietly opened, how many introductions he'd arranged, how many opportunities he'd orchestrated, while making it look like chance or luck. That contract changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just another small logistics company. I was the woman who'd landed the Parker retail account. Other companies wanted to know who I was. Industry publications started calling. Within a year, my revenue had tripled. By 2020, when I was 33, Cole Logistics was worth $50 million. I'd built something real, something substantial. Industry magazines called me the Iron Dove, a nickname I secretly loved. Tough in negotiations, but fair. Ruthless with competitors who tried to undercut me, but fiercely protective of my employees. I paid well-offered good benefits and created a company culture where competence mattered more than credentials or connections. But success came with a cost. I had no personal life. No romantic relationships that lasted more than a few months. I couldn't let anyone close enough to see the wounds I carried. No real friends, just business acquaintances and industry contacts. I'd built walls so high that even my own employees felt like they never really knew me. They respected me, maybe even admired me, but they didn't know me. Inside, I was still that girl who'd been told she wasn't good enough. Every success felt fragile, like it could be taken away at any moment. I worked constantly, compulsively, as if stopping would mean losing everything. I couldn't enjoy what I'd built because I was too busy trying to prove I deserved it. Sometimes late at night in my office, I'd search my family's names online. I'd see photos of my father at charity galas, my mother at society luncheons. I'd see Noreen's engagement announcement and the social pages her wedding date set for June 2025. They looked happy, successful, like a complete family that had never had a missing piece. They never reached out. Not once in 15 years. No birthday cards, no Christmas calls, nothing. And I never reached out either. Pride maybe, or fear that they'd reject me all over again. Or maybe we'd all just agreed silently that I'd been erased from the family story. I told myself I'd moved on, that I didn't need them, that my success was proof I'd been right to leave. Success felt earned, felt real, until I learned the truth about the hands that shaped my path. That truth would come crashing down in May 2025 when I got the call I'd been dreading for 2 years without knowing I was dreading it. Wallace had collapsed at his home. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was gone. Late-stage pancreatic cancer, his assistant told me through tears. He'd known for 2 years and told almost no one. I stood in my corner office phone, still pressed to my ear, and the floor seemed to drop out from under me. Wallace was dead. The man who'd saved me, who'd believed in me, who'd been more of a father than the one I'd been born to, gone. And I hadn't even known he was sick. The funeral was small, just as he'd requested. Maybe 40 people in a quiet chapel, all of us numb with grief and shock. I sat in the second row wearing black, feeling hollow. His ex-wife was there, dignified and distant. A few executives from his company, some old friends, but no family. Wallace had always been intensely private about his personal life. I realized sitting there that I'd known him for 20 years and had never met any relatives. After the service, as people filed out offering hushed condolences, a distinguished man in his 60s approached me. "Ms. Cole, I'm Arthur Henderson, Mr. Cole's attorney." "I'm so sorry for your loss," I said automatically. "And yours. He spoke of you often. You were very important to him." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. "Mr. Cole left specific instructions regarding you. This envelope is not to be opened until after a certain event occurs. I'll contact you when it's time." I took the envelope, feeling its weight, both literal and metaphorical. "What event? What do you mean?" Mr. Henderson's expression was kind but firm. "I'm not at liberty to say. But you'll know when the time comes." Mr. Cole was quite clear about that. "You'll know." "But I don't understand." "Keep it safe," he said gently. "Wallace trusted you completely. Trust him now." I wanted to press further to demand answers, but grief had made me too tired to fight. I took the envelope home and placed it in my personal safe next to my passport and the deed to my building. It sat there like a weight, a mystery, a connection to the man who'd changed my life. For days afterward, I moved through life mechanically. I went to work, attended meetings, signed contracts. But inside, I was reeling. Wallace was the only person who'd truly known me, the only person whose opinion I valued, whose pride in me felt real. Without him, my success felt emptier somehow, like I was performing for an audience that had left the theater. 2 weeks after the funeral, my assistant brought in the afternoon mail. Most of it was the usual invoices, contracts, industry newsletters. But one envelope stood out. Thick, expensive cardstock with elaborate calligraphy addressing it to Ms. Evelyn Cole. No return address. I opened it slowly, somehow knowing what it was before I saw it. A wedding invitation. Noreen Cole and James Mitchell, June 15th. The Ashford Estate. Black tie optional. The card itself was impersonal, formatted like all the others they'd probably sent to 200 guests. Family plus guest. No personal note. No dear Evelyn or, "We hope you can join us." Just a printed card acknowledging my existence in the most minimal way possible. I stared at it for a long time, sitting at my desk overlooking the city I'd conquered. 15 years. 15 years of silence. And this was how they reached out. Not with an apology, not with curiosity about my life, but with an obligation fulfilled. An invitation sent because to not send one would be noticed, would raise questions they didn't want to answer. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to send it back with a note saying I'd moved on, that they were irrelevant to my life now. But another part of me, the part that was still somehow that wounded child, wanted to see them, wanted them to see me, wanted to know if they'd changed, if they felt any regret, if they ever thought about the daughter they'd thrown away. That evening, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but when I answered, the voice was achingly familiar. "Evelyn," my mother's voice, crisp and controlled. "I hope you received the invitation." I did. A pause. "I'm calling to ask to request that if you do choose to attend, you please not make a scene. This is Noreen's day. It's important for your father's business relationships. Everything should be perfect. Not, we've missed you. Not, how have you been? Not even, I'm sorry it's been so long. Just a warning. A preemptive strike to keep me in my place. I wouldn't dream of ruining Noreen's perfect day. I said, my voice steady despite the pain blooming in my chest. Good. Well, we'll see you there then. She hung up before I could respond. The entire call had lasted less than 2 minutes. I sat there holding the phone, feeling 15 years old again, feeling invisible, feeling like the problem child who needed to be managed and contained. But I wasn't 15 anymore. I was 38, and I'd built something they couldn't take from me. I had proof of my worth, tangible and undeniable. I walked to my office window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. Somewhere out there was my family preparing for a celebration I wasn't really invited to, not in any way that mattered. Somewhere in my safe was Wallace's mysterious envelope holding secrets I didn't yet understand. I thought about the girl who'd left with $200 and a suitcase. She'd been so scared, so certain she was worthless. If I could go back and tell her where she'd end up, would she believe me? Would it have made the journey easier? Maybe facing them would give me closure. Maybe I could see them one more time, prove to myself that I'd moved beyond their judgment, and finally let go of the child who still craved their approval. Maybe I could walk into that wedding, watch them celebrate their perfect daughter, and walk out truly free. I pulled out my phone and sent a simple RSVP. Yes, one guest. Then I changed it to just yes. I didn't need a +1. I didn't need anyone to hold my hand through this. Over the next few weeks, as June 15th approached, I chose my outfit carefully. A simple navy dress, elegant but understated, expensive but not ostentatious. Nothing that would draw attention or seem like I was trying too hard. I didn't want to make a statement. I just wanted to observe, to see them, to prove to myself I'd survived them. I told my assistant I'd be unavailable that Saturday. I cleared my calendar. I arranged for a car service, then canceled it and decided to take a taxi instead. Everything about this trip was about being small, being invisible, slipping in and out without causing ripples. I didn't know that Wallace's sealed envelope and this wedding were connected. I didn't know that his attorney would soon reach out to say the event had occurred. I didn't know that the groom standing beside my sister had secrets that would explode into that carefully controlled celebration like a bomb. I decided to go not for revenge, but for closure. I was wrong about everything. The taxi pulls up to the Ashford estate at exactly 4:30 on a perfect June afternoon. I could have arranged for my driver could have arrived in the black Mercedes I use for business meetings, but that would have defeated the purpose. Today, I'm not the CEO of a $50 million company. Today, I'm just the daughter who disappeared, returning to see if the past can finally be put to rest. I pay the driver in cash and step out onto the circular driveway. A young valet in a crisp uniform approaches, reaching for a car door that's already closed, then does a visible double take when he sees my face. His eyes widen with recognition. I've been featured in enough business publications that people in certain circles know who I am, but he catches himself quickly, his professional mask sliding back into place. He says nothing, just offers a small, almost respectful nod, before turning to the next arriving vehicle, a Bentley that probably cost more than most people's houses. I smooth down my navy dress, a simple A-line that cost $1,500, but looks like it came from a department store. That was intentional. Everything about today is intentional. I'm here to observe, not to make statements. I want to see them without the complication of them seeing the real me. The entrance to the Ashford estate takes my breath away despite my determination to remain unmoved. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hang from soaring ceilings. Ice sculptures in the shapes of swans and angels flank the doorway, already beginning to weep in the June warmth. A string quartet plays Vivaldi near towering arrangements of white roses, peonies, and hydrangeas that must have cost thousands of dollars each. The marble floors gleam like mirrors. Every detail screams wealth, taste, perfection. This wedding cost more than most people make in 5 years. Easily $300,000, maybe more. I find myself doing the math automatically, a habit from years of analyzing budgets and expenses. The flowers alone are probably 50,000. The venue rental, catering, photography, the designer dress I glimpsed in Noreen's social media posts, all of it adds up to a statement. The Coles are still successful, still important, still worthy of respect. As I enter the main reception hall, I notice a discreet brass plaque by the entrance, the Ashford Estate. Something about that name tugs at my memory like a word on the tip of my tongue. I know this place, or I should know it, but I can't quite grasp why it feels significant. I make a mental note to look into it later, then push the thought aside. My phone buzzes in my clutch. I pull it out and see 17 missed calls from my office. A crisis with a shipment probably, or a client emergency. Any other day I'd be handling it immediately. But today I silence the phone completely and slip it back into my bag. Whatever it is can wait. Tonight I'm not the woman who built an empire from nothing. Tonight I'm just Evelyn, the forgotten daughter, returning to witness the family that moved on without her. That's when I see her. My mother. Margaret Cole spots me from across the room, and the color drains from her face so quickly I wonder if she might faint. For a moment we just stare at each other across the sea of arriving guests. Then she's moving toward me, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble, her champagne-colored dress swishing with each urgent step. She reaches me and immediately grabs my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin, hard enough to leave marks. "You came," she whispers, and her voice is tight with something I can't quite identify. Fear, anger, desperation. "You invited me," I say quietly. "Please, Evelyn." Her grip tightens. "Please don't cause any trouble. This day is important for your father's business connections. There are investors here, partners, clients. Everything needs to be perfect. Just sit in the back, smile if anyone looks at you, and leave quietly after the ceremony. Can you do that?" I study her face, really look at her for the first time in 15 years. She's aged more than I expected. 75. Maybe 78 pounds on her small frame, her face drawn despite expertly applied makeup. Her eyes hold that same sharp anxiety I remember from childhood, that constant worry about appearances, about what people think. But there's something else now, too. Something that looks almost like fear. She won't meet my gaze directly. Her eyes keep darting away, landing on my shoulder, my collarbone, anywhere but my eyes. "I'm not here to cause problems, Mom," I say softly. She flinches at the word Mom, as if it's a weapon. "Good. That's good." She releases my arm abruptly and steps back, already looking around to see if anyone noticed our interaction. "Your seat is in the back, row 20, behind the column." Before I can respond, she's hurrying away, leaving behind a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and unspoken words. I watch her go, realizing something that sends a chill through me. My mother isn't angry that I came. She's afraid of me. But why? What could I possibly do that would threaten her so much? I make my way through the crowd, keeping my head down, trying to be invisible. Guests mill about with champagne flutes, their laughter and conversation creating a pleasant buzz. Nobody looks at me twice. I'm just another guest in a simple dress, unremarkable, forgettable. I find my assigned seat exactly where my mother said it would be, last row, partially hidden behind an ornate decorative column wrapped in white roses and ivy. Of course, even in my absence, they've found a way to make me disappear. As I sit down, I notice an elegant elderly woman seated just a few rows ahead of me. She must be 90 years old, but she sits with perfect posture, dressed in a dove-gray silk suit with pearls at her throat and wrists. There's something regal about her, something that speaks of old money and older wisdom. Her white hair is styled in a classic chignon, and even from behind I can see the quality of her clothing, the deliberate grace of her movements. As if sensing my gaze, she turns and looks directly at me. Her eyes meet mine, and I feel a jolt of something I can't name. She's looking at me with such intensity, such knowing warmth, that I feel suddenly exposed. But it's not the cruel exposure of judgment, it's something else entirely. Recognition. Pride. Love. She smiles, And it's the warmest smile anyone has given me in years. Not pity, not condescension, just pure, uncomplicated warmth. She nods slightly as if acknowledging something unspoken between us, and then her lips move. I lean forward slightly, trying to read them. Welcome home, child. I'm certain I've never met this woman in my life. I would remember her, that face, those eyes, that presence. But she's looking at me like she knows me. Like she's been waiting for me, like my presence here matters to her in some profound way. She turns back around, but not before I see her raise a delicate handkerchief to her eyes, dabbing at tears. I sit back confused and unsettled. Who is she? Why does she care that I'm here? Around the room, the tableau of my family plays out in familiar patterns. My father stands near the bar, his voice booming as he holds court with a group of men in expensive suits. Business associates, probably, or potential investors. He's in his element, commanding attention, radiating authority. He hasn't looked in my direction once. Not once. 15 years, and he can't even acknowledge my presence with a glance. Near the front of the room, Noreen poses for photographs with her bridesmaids, a vision in white lace and crystal beading. She's radiant, glowing with that particular happiness of brides who believe they're beginning perfect lives. The photographer calls out directions and she turns this way and that, always finding her best angle, always knowing exactly how to smile for the camera. It's a skill she mastered young, the art of performing perfection. And then there's the groom. James Mitchell. I don't know him, have never met him, but I can see him from here, standing awkwardly near the altar, tugging at his collar. He's handsome in his tuxedo, tall and well-built, but there's something wrong with his posture. He looks like a man who wants to run. And he keeps glancing toward the back of the room, toward me. Every few seconds, his eyes find me in my partially hidden seat. His expression is strange, trapped, guilty, anxious. When our eyes meet, he doesn't look away immediately, like most people would. He holds my gaze for a beat too long, and in that moment, I see something in his face that makes my stomach clench. He knows something. Something about me. Something that's making him deeply, visibly uncomfortable. The ceremony is about to begin. Guests are being ushered to their seats. The string quartet transitions to Pachelbel's canon. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned, exactly as my mother demanded, perfect, controlled, flawless. But something is very wrong. I can feel it in the air, in the way that elderly woman looked at me, in the way my mother fled from me, in the way the groom keeps staring at me with those desperate, guilty eyes. Someone in this room knew exactly who I was, and it wasn't my family. The ceremony itself passes in a blur of ritual and tradition. I watch from my corner as Noreen floats down the aisle on my father's arm, as vows are exchanged, as rings are placed, and promises made. I'm so far back, so hidden behind my decorative column that I might as well not be there at all, which is exactly what everyone wants. I remain perfectly still, perfectly silent, the ghost at the feast that no one acknowledges. By the time we move into the reception hall, the sun is setting, casting golden light through floor-to-ceiling windows. The room has been transformed into something out of a fairy tale or a magazine spread. Round tables draped in ivory linens surround a central dance floor. More flowers, more candles, more evidence of wealth carefully deployed to create an atmosphere of effortless elegance. Champagne flows freely from a fountain near the bar. A jazz trio plays softly as guests find their seats, their conversation building into a pleasant roar of celebration. I'm seated at table 20 naturally. The overflow table tucked near the service entrance, populated by distant cousins and +1s who don't quite fit anywhere else. No one at my table knows who I am, and I prefer it that way. I accept a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and take the smallest sip, needing something to do with my hands. The energy in the room is buoyant, almost giddy. This is the kind of wedding people will talk about for months: the venue, the flowers, the dress, the guest list. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned, exactly as my parents orchestrated it. Perfect and controlled and entirely on script. Then my father stands and the room gradually quiets. Richard Cole commands attention without effort. He spent a lifetime perfecting that skill, knowing exactly how to modulate his voice to draw people in, how to pause for effect, how to make people hang on his every word. Tonight he's in rare form, his face flushed with pride and perhaps too much champagne. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, his voice warm and paternal. "As father of the bride, it's my privilege to say a few words about my daughter." He launches into a toast that sounds rehearsed because it probably is. He talks about Noreen's beauty, her grace, her accomplishments. But as I listen, I realize that every accomplishment he mentions is social rather than substantive. The charity gala she chaired, the society connections she's cultivated, her role on various prestigious boards, all positions that came through family connections rather than merit. He's not celebrating her intelligence or her work ethic or anything she's built herself. He's celebrating her ability to play the role assigned to her. "I couldn't be more proud," he continues, and I can hear the genuine emotion in his voice. "Noreen has been everything a father could hope for." Then his tone shifts, becomes slightly harder, and I feel my body tense instinctively. "I've learned in life," he says, his eyes scanning the room, "that some children are blessings and some are lessons." He pauses, letting the words sink in. A few guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Thankfully, my Noreen is a blessing in every way. She's everything a father could want: beautiful, graceful, and most importantly, loyal to family." The implication is unmistakable. The contrast he's drawing couldn't be clearer if he'd pointed directly at me. Some children are blessings, some are lessons, some are loyal, some are not. I feel eyes turning toward me, guests who know about the family dynamics, who remember that there was once another daughter who can read between the lines of what Richard is really saying. My face remains carefully neutral, but my hands grip my champagne flute so tightly, I'm surprised it doesn't shatter. I glance toward my mother. Margaret is staring down at her plate, her jaw clenched so tight I can see the muscles working. She's not looking at my father, not looking at me, just staring at nothing, while her husband publicly acknowledges that one daughter is a blessing and the other, unnamed but clearly identified, is something else entirely. And Noreen. My sister sits at the head table in her wedding gown, smiling, but when I catch her expression in profile, I see something that surprises me. Her eyes aren't celebrating, they're sad. She knows exactly what our father is doing, knows that he's using her wedding as a platform to twist the knife one more time, and she's not happy about it. The guests applaud as Richard sits down, the sound uncertain and scattered. The mood in the room has shifted slightly, the perfection marred by something uncomfortable that no one wants to name. Then Noreen stands and the applause grows warmer, more genuine. She's the bride after all, the star of this production. "Thank you all so much for being here," she begins, her voice clear and practiced. "This day has been absolutely perfect. I'm so lucky to have such wonderful people in my life, such an amazing family." She continues in this vein, hitting all the expected notes. How grateful she is, how happy she is, how this is the beginning of her perfect life with her perfect husband. But then, as she's speaking, her eyes find mine across the room. For just a moment, our gazes lock, and I see her facade crack. Her eyes well up with tears that she quickly blinks away, and when she continues speaking, there's a tremor in her voice that wasn't there before. "Family is everything," she says, and her voice wavers. Even when it's complicated. It's the smallest acknowledgement, barely there, but it's the closest thing to recognition I've received all night. An admission that our family isn't the flawless unit they're presenting to the world, that complications exist, that I exist even if no one wants to say it out loud. The guests applaud warmly as she sits down, oblivious to the undercurrents. But I saw it. That moment of pain, of awareness of something that might have been regret. As soon as she's seated, James leans toward her, whispering something urgent in her ear. From where I sit, I can see her stiffen, see her shake her head no, but he doesn't stop. He keeps whispering, more insistent now, and their exchange becomes a hissed argument that grows more intense with each passing second. My father notices. He shoots them a warning look, his expression darkening silently, commanding them to stop whatever scene they're creating. But James doesn't stop. Instead, he stands up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor in the sudden silence. The sound is jarring wrong like a record scratch in the middle of a symphony. The entire room falls silent. 200 guests turn to look at the groom standing beside his new bride, his face pale and sweating despite the air conditioning, his hands trembling as he reaches for the microphone. I need to say something. He begins, his voice shaking. My father half rises from his seat, his face going from red to purple with barely controlled rage. Sit down, James, he says, his voice low and dangerous. Now. But James doesn't sit. He's looking across the room, looking directly at me, and his expression is one of desperate apology mixed with terrible resolve. Our eyes meet, and I see in his face that he's about to do something that can't be undone. I can't start this marriage with a lie, he says, and his voice is growing stronger now, steadier with the conviction of someone who's made an irreversible decision. There's someone in this room who deserves the truth, someone who's been wronged by this family in ways you can't imagine. The room erupts in confused whispers. Heads turn trying to figure out who he's talking about, what he means. Noreen's face has gone completely white, her hand reaching out to grab his arm, but he steps away from her touch. Margaret's perfectly manicured hand shoots out and grabs Richard's arm, her knuckles white with the force of her grip. And I sit frozen in my chair, my heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat and my ears everywhere. This man, this stranger I've never met, knows something. Something big. Something that's making him willing to destroy his own wedding, to defy my father, to risk everything. And he's about to say it out loud in front of 200 people. The room went silent, and I knew everything was about to change. James takes a deep breath, and in that moment before he speaks, time seems to stretch impossibly thin. I can hear my own heartbeat, feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes, sense the fragile veneer of this perfect wedding about to shatter like crystal hitting marble. My name is James Mitchell. He begins, his voice clearer now, steadier. And I'm not just Noreen's husband. For the past 5 years, I've been the personal attorney for Wallace Cole. The name hits the room like a shockwave. Wallace Cole. The legendary CEO whose death 2 weeks ago made headlines in the business section of every major newspaper. My Wallace. And this man, this stranger marrying my sister, was his attorney. My blood runs cold. The room spins slightly and I grip the edge of my table to steady myself. James continues, his words coming faster now, as if he's afraid he'll lose his nerve if he slows down. Mr. Cole entrusted me with certain family matters, confidential matters regarding the Cole family. He gestures vaguely toward the head table where my parents sit frozen. 6 months ago, Richard Cole approached me with a proposition. My father's face has gone from purple to an alarming shade of gray. He wanted access to Wallace Cole's estate. James says, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Specifically, a trust fund that Wallace had established years ago. Richard wanted me to help him claim it, to fabricate documents proving he was the rightful recipient of funds that were never meant for him. The room explodes. Shocked gasps, confused murmurs, someone's champagne glass hitting the floor and shattering. My father lunges up from his chair, his face contorted with rage, moving toward James with his fists clenched. But 2 groomsmen, young men I don't recognize, step forward and physically restrain him, each grabbing an arm. You lying son of a... My father begins, spittle flying from his lips. But James cuts him off, his voice rising above the chaos. I have the documents, Richard. The emails you sent me. The falsified paperwork you asked me to prepare. I kept everything, even though I knew I shouldn't, even though it violated attorney-client privilege. I kept it because some part of me knew this day would come. The room is in pandemonium now. Guests are standing talking over each other, phones coming out to record what's quickly becoming the scandal of the season. But James isn't finished. Richard made me an offer, he continues, and now his voice is fueled by the momentum of confession, by the relief of finally telling the truth. If I helped him steal from Wallace Cole's estate, he'd give me what I wanted most, a partnership in his prestigious law firm, and his blessing to marry Noreen. He turns to look at my sister, and I see genuine pain in his eyes. Real emotion, not performance. I cared about you, Noreen. He says, his voice softer now, meant for her, even though 200 people are listening. I still do. But I can't build our life on corruption and lies. Your father didn't just offer me rewards for helping him. He manipulated both of us into this marriage for his own purposes. Noreen is sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks. Her hands cover her face, her shoulders shaking. The perfect bride dissolving before everyone's eyes. Richard told me that if I didn't cooperate, James continues, his voice hardening again, he'd destroy my legal career. He has connections to the State Bar Association, he made that very clear. One word from him, one fabricated ethics violation, and I'd be disbarred. I'd lose everything I'd worked for. My mother finally speaks, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. James, stop this. You're drunk. You don't know what you're saying. You're having some kind of breakdown. But James shakes his head firmly, cutting her off. I'm completely sober, Mrs. Cole. I haven't touched alcohol all night specifically because I knew I needed to do this. And I know exactly what I'm saying. I've been carrying this guilt for 6 months, watching this family prepare for a wedding that was built on blackmail and corruption. Watching you plan this perfect day while knowing what your husband was trying to do. Margaret's mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. She looks suddenly old, fragile, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Then James turns, and his eyes find me in the back of the room. The moment our gazes meet, I see something shift in his expression from defiance to deep, genuine remorse. I'm sorry, he says, and his voice breaks on the words. Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what your father did. I'm sorry for being part of this even briefly. I'm sorry for not having the courage to do the right thing sooner. The room collectively turns 200 heads swiveling to look at me in my corner behind my decorative column. Many of them are seeing me for the first time, really seeing me. I can hear the whispers erupting around me. That's Evelyn Richards' other daughter. I thought she ran away years ago. Why would Wallace Cole care about her? What does she have to do with any of this? I stand slowly, my legs shaking but somehow holding me up. Every eye in the room is on me now, but for once I don't feel small. I feel something else. Something like fate clicking into place. My voice when I find it is steadier than I expected. Why did Wallace make you promise that James? Why would he care if I was here? James reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out an envelope. Not just any envelope, I recognize it immediately. The thick manila envelope that Wallace's attorney gave me at the funeral. The one I placed in my safe unopened because the attorney said I'd know when it was time. Because he said you deserve to know who your family really is. James says, his voice carrying that simple, devastating truth across the silent room. He pauses, holding up the envelope so everyone can see it. And because, another pause heavy with meaning, he said it was time for you to read this. Wallace's final letter. The mysterious instructions. The event that would trigger its opening. This was the event Wallace had foreseen. He'd known I'd come to this wedding. He'd known his attorney would be here. He'd orchestrated this revelation even from beyond the grave to force the truth into the light. James starts walking toward me, weaving through tables past my father who's being held back by groomsmen, past my mother who's frozen in horror, past Noreen who's collapsed into her chair. The crowd parts for him like the Red Sea, everyone watching this impossible scene unfold. Wallace told me you'd come tonight, James says as he approaches my table. He said I'd recognize you immediately. He said you'd be sitting in the back trying to be invisible, and that you'd need to see all of this with your own eyes before you'd believe it. He stops in front of me, this stranger who somehow holds pieces of my history I didn't know existed. He loved you very much, James says quietly, meant only for me, even though everyone is still watching. Everything he did was for you, and he wanted you to know the truth, all of it, even the parts that would hurt. He crossed the room and placed the envelope in my hands, and with it the key to everything I'd never understood. I hold the envelope in my hands, feeling its weight, feeling the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me. For 15 years I've been invisible to these people, to this family. The forgotten daughter, the failure, the lesson, not the blessing. But I'm not that girl anymore. I make a decision in that moment, standing in the back of the room behind my decorative column. If James had the courage to tell the truth, then so do I. I start walking slowly, deliberately up the center aisle toward the front of the room. My heels click against the marble floor, the only sound in the absolute silence. With each step, I feel something shifting. My simple navy dress, which I chose to help me disappear, suddenly feels like a statement. Understated elegance. Power that doesn't need to announce itself. Confidence that whispers instead of shouts. When I reach the front of the room, I step up to the microphone. James moves aside, giving me space, his eyes grateful and apologetic. I take a breath, let it out slowly, and when I speak, my voice carries the authority I've developed in 1,000 boardroom negotiations. "Thank you, James," I say, looking at him directly. That took courage. Then I turn to face the crowd, these strangers and distant relatives who've spent the evening celebrating a family I was erased from. For those of you who don't know me, I begin, my voice steady and clear, and judging by the confused looks that's most of you, my name is Evelyn Cole. I'm Richard and Margaret's eldest daughter, the one they don't talk about, the one who ran away 15 years ago. I let that information settle over the room, watching comprehension dawn on faces, seeing the pieces clicking into place for people who'd always wondered about the family mystery they were too polite to ask about. I didn't run away, I continue, and there's steel in my voice now. I was driven away. But that's not why I'm standing here. I pause, gathering my thoughts, feeling Wallace's envelope in my hand like a talisman. This next part is harder, more personal, but it needs to be said. "I need to correct something James said. He mentioned Wallace Cole's estate, spoke about him as a business legend." My voice softens with genuine emotion. Wallace Cole wasn't just a business legend to me. He was my mentor, my teacher, and for 10 years the closest thing to a real father I ever had. My voice catches slightly on that word, father, and I have to pause, swallow hard, push through the grief that's still so raw. When I left home with nothing but $200 and a suitcase, Wallace found me. Or maybe he'd been watching, waiting for the right moment. Either way, he saved me. He taught me everything about business, about integrity, about grace under pressure, about how to be strong without being cruel, successful without being ruthless. The room is completely silent now, hanging on every word. "And when he passed away 2 weeks ago," my voice breaks, cracks right down the middle, and I have to stop. Close my eyes. Breathe. When I open them again, tears are threatening, but I won't let them fall. Not yet. I lost the only person who ever truly believed in me. I turn, looking directly at my father for the first time, looking him right in the eyes while 200 people watch. "The trust fund you tried to steal, Dad." I let the word Dad drip with irony. "That was mine. Wallace set it up for my education when I was 8 years old. $500,000 placed in your care as trustee, designated specifically for my college tuition and future. You were supposed to protect it. Instead, you embezzled every penny of it to save your failing company in 2005. The room erupts. Gasps, shouts, the scraping of chairs as people stand to get a better view. My father's face goes from red to a dangerous purple, his eyes bulging with rage. "That's a lie," he shouts, his voice cracking with fury. "You ungrateful—" I raise one hand, and remarkably miraculously the room falls silent. It's a gesture I've used in countless business meetings, a simple movement that commands attention and respect. The fact that it works here now tells me everything about how the power dynamic has shifted. My father's mouth snaps shut, and I can see the moment he realizes it too. That I'm not the broken 18-year-old who left with nothing. That something fundamental has changed. I'm not here to accuse you, Dad. I say, my voice calm and measured. I'm here to tell you something you don't know. I pause, letting the tension build, letting curiosity override shock. The Ashford estate. I gesture around at the opulent venue surrounding us. This beautiful location hosting my sister's wedding, I own it. Well, my company does. Cole Logistics acquired it 3 months ago as part of a commercial real estate portfolio. The gasps that echo through the room are loud enough to shake the chandeliers. The catering company serving you tonight, mine. The floral arrangements you've been admiring, my vendor contracted through one of my subsidiary companies. The string quartet that played during the ceremony, they're on retainer with my hospitality division. I watch the information wash over the crowd like a wave, see faces shifting from confusion to shock to something that looks almost like awe. I didn't plan this. I clarify because I want them to understand this isn't revenge, it's just cosmic irony. I had absolutely no idea Noreen had chosen this venue, but when I received the wedding invitation 2 weeks ago, I looked up the location and I realized. I smile, and it's not a cruel smile, just one of genuine amazement at fate's sense of humor. I realized I was being invited to my own property, that I would be funding my own sister's wedding. Now I address the entire room, my voice rising with confidence. I'm the CEO of Cole Logistics. My company is currently valued at $50 million. We employ over 300 people across 5 states. Last year, I was named to Forbes' Top 40 Under 40 list. I've been profiled in the Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, and Fortune magazine. The silence is absolute. You could hear a pin drop. And tonight, I say, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, I'm funding my own sister's wedding. A wedding thrown by the family who told me I'd never amount to anything. Who said I was a lesson, not a blessing. Who wished I had never been born. I look at my father's ashen face, my mother's shocked expression, and I feel something I've never felt before in their presence. Not triumph exactly, not even vindication. Just freedom. The freedom of truth finally spoken out loud. The elderly woman Eleanor suddenly stands from her seat a few rows back. She begins to applaud slowly, at first her weathered hands creating a steady rhythm in the silence. Her face is streaming with tears, but she's smiling, beaming with what looks like fierce pride. Others begin to join in, hesitant at first, then more confidently. Guests stand applauding, some looking confused about what exactly they're applauding, but caught up in the moment nonetheless. Someone whistles. Someone else calls out, "Incredible!" But my parents remain seated, frozen like statues, their faces drained of all color. My father's mouth works soundlessly like a fish drowning in air. My mother grips the edge of the table, her knuckles white, staring at me as if I'm a ghost who's come back to haunt her. And Noreen. My sister sits in her wedding gown, mascara-stained tears still running down her face, looking at me with an expression I can't quite read. It's not anger, it's not jealousy, it looks almost like relief. Their laughter died in their throats, but the night's revelations were just beginning. I step away from the microphone, my legs somehow still holding me upright despite the adrenaline crash beginning to hit my system. The moment I move, the room explodes into noise, not applause anymore, but something more chaotic. Conversation erupting from every corner, voices overlapping, the buzz of shock and curiosity, and scandal filling the air like electricity. And then I see it. Phones. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, pulled from clutches and jacket pockets, screens glowing in the dimming light. Guests are Googling me right there, right now, fact-checking my claims in real time. I watch a woman in an emerald green gown turn her phone to show her companion. Even from here, I can see the search results, images of me in business suits standing at podiums, shaking hands with politicians and industry leaders. My professional headshot from the company website. the Forbes article with my photo. "Oh my God," someone nearby says loud enough for me to hear. "It's really her, look at this." "I read about her company last month in the Wall Street Journal," another voice chimes in. "That piece about women-led businesses disrupting male-dominated industries. She was the cover feature." A man in a gray suit leans over to his wife, showing her his phone. "Says here she donated $2 million to women's education initiatives last year. Set up a foundation." I watch the narrative rewrite itself in real time, can almost see the mental calculations happening behind 200 pairs of eyes. The daughter who failed. The daughter who ran away. The family embarrassment. All those labels dissolving, reforming into something else entirely. The daughter who conquered. The daughter who succeeded despite them. The daughter who became someone worth knowing. The social hierarchy in the room inverts like an hourglass flipping. Suddenly, I'm not the outcast in the back row. I'm the most important person here. Men in expensive suits begin moving toward me, business cards appearing in their hands like magic tricks. They want introductions. They want connections. They want to be associated with success, even if 5 minutes ago they didn't know I existed, Ms. Cole. I'm with Barrington Capital. Would love to discuss potential partnerships. My firm handles corporate acquisitions. I accept their cards, numbly barely processing their names or their pitches. They're circling me like sharks who've just realized the small fish is actually an orca. Meanwhile, my father sits at the head table, frozen in his chair, watching his carefully curated network abandon him for his estranged daughter. His face has gone from purple to an ashen gray. One of his oldest business partners, a silver-haired man I vaguely remember from childhood dinner parties, approaches Richard's table and claps him on the shoulder. But there's no warmth in the gesture. "Why didn't you ever mention you had such an accomplished daughter, Richard?" The man says, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby tables. "Bad form keeping that quiet. Makes one wonder what else you've kept quiet over the years." The implication is clear. If Richard lied about this, what else has he lied about? In this world, reputation is currency, and my father's just became worthless. I turn away from the crowd pressing around me, looking toward the head table where my family sits in various states of collapse. My mother hasn't moved. She sits perfectly still, staring down at her hands folded in her lap. Tears stream down her face, cutting tracks through her carefully applied makeup, but she makes no move to wipe them away. Her lips are moving, and I can just barely make out the words she's whispering to herself over and over. She planned all of this. She planned everything. But she's wrong. I didn't plan any of this. I came here expecting nothing, hoping only for closure. I had no idea James was Wallace's attorney. No idea he'd confess my father's corruption. No idea this wedding was being held at my own property. All of this was chance or fate or Wallace orchestrating from beyond the grave. But it wasn't my plan. Beside my mother, my father attempts to stand, gripping the edge of the table for support. His hands are shaking so badly that his champagne glass rattles against the tablecloth. He opens his mouth as if to say something to defend himself or condemn me, but no words come out. His legs buckle slightly, and he has to sit back down heavily. In the span of 10 minutes, he's aged a decade. The powerful, commanding man who gave that cruel toast earlier has vanished, replaced by someone diminished, exposed, defeated. And then there's Noreen. My sister has given up all pretense of composure. She's sobbing openly, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with the force of her crying. Her perfect wedding, her perfect day has dissolved into scandal and revelation. James hovers nearby, trying to offer comfort, but when he reaches for her shoulder, she pushes his hand away roughly. Then she stands. Her wedding dress rustles and whispers around her, all that white lace and crystal beading that was supposed to represent purity and new beginnings. She lifts her head and looks across the room directly at me. Our eyes meet, and for the first time in 15 years, maybe for the first time ever, I see my sister clearly. Not the perfect golden child, not the favored daughter who took everything I should have had. just a woman broken and vulnerable and human. And in her eyes I see something that takes my breath away. Not the hatred I expected. Not envy or resentment or any of the emotions I'd assumed she felt toward me. Instead, I see something that looks like desperate wordless apology. Like she's been carrying a weight for years, and finally has a chance to put it down. The moment stretches between us, laden with 15 years of silence and hurt, and questions never asked. Then the crowd presses closer around me, someone asking another question I can't process, and I realize I can't breathe. The room is too hot, too crowded, too full of people who want something from me. I need air. I need space. I need to think. "Excuse me," I murmur, pushing through the circle of business cards and eager faces. "I need a moment." I walk quickly toward the doors leading to the garden terrace, my heels clicking urgently against the marble. Behind me, I can hear disappointed voices, people calling after me, but I don't stop. I push through the French doors and out into the June night. The terrace is empty, lit only by strands of tiny lights wrapped around the pergola. The air is cool and sweet with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. I walk to the stone railing and grip it hard, feeling the solid reality of it grounding me. And then finally alone, I let my composure crack. My hands shake violently. My breathing comes in rapid, shallow gasps that might turn into sobs if I let them. This wasn't revenge, I swear it wasn't. I came here for closure, to prove to myself that I'd moved on, that they couldn't hurt me anymore. But instead, I've torn open old wounds in front of 200 strangers. I've exposed my family's darkest secrets. I've turned my sister's wedding into a spectacle. I think of Wallace Wish desperately that he was here. He'd know what to say. He'd know how to help me make sense of this chaos. But Wallace is gone, and I'm alone with the consequences of truths that maybe should have stayed buried. I realize I'm still clutching his letter, now crumpled in my grip. The envelope that's supposed to explain everything. I'm afraid to open it. Afraid of what truth it might contain. What other revelations might shatter what's left of my understanding of my own history. Behind me, I hear footsteps on the terrace. Slow, hesitant footsteps accompanied by the rustle of fabric. I turn, expecting to see James, or perhaps one of those business associates who followed me out here. Or maybe security coming to tell me it's time to leave. But it's Noreen. She stands in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow from the reception hall. Her wedding dress seems to glow in the darkness, but her face is a mess of running mascara and tears. She's not the perfect bride anymore. She's just my little sister, looking small and scared and broken. "Please," she says, and her voice is so small, so different from the confident social butterfly I watched earlier. "Please don't go. We need to talk." She takes a step toward me. Not as the perfect daughter and the forgotten one, as sisters. "There are things you don't know, things I've needed to tell you for 10 years. My sister, who hadn't spoken to me in 15 years, was begging me to stay, and I knew whatever she had to say would shatter me all over again. I open my mouth to respond to Noreen, to tell her, "Yes, we can talk, we need to talk." But before any words can form, a shadow fills the doorway behind her. My father. His face is flushed, not just with rage, but with alcohol. I can see it in the redness of his cheeks, the slight glassiness of his eyes, the way he's holding himself too rigidly, overcompensating for the liquor in his system. "Noreen," he says, and his voice is sharp as a whip crack. "Go back inside. Now." Noreen turns to face him, and I see her body language shift immediately. Her shoulders curl inward. Her head drops slightly. 20 years of conditioning activating in an instant. "Dad, I just need to..." I said now. He reaches out and grabs her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough that I see her wince. He physically pulls her away from me, away from the doorway, away from whatever truth she was about to speak. "Dad, please. Go." And she does. Of course she does. Noreen has spent her entire life obeying, pleasing, performing. She throws one last look over her shoulder at me, her eyes desperate and pleading silently, begging me to understand, to wait, to not disappear again. Then she's gone, pulled back into the reception hall, swallowed by the crowd and the chaos we've created. And I'm alone with my father for the first time in 15 years. My heart is racing, but it's not fear making my pulse pound in my ears. It's something else entirely. Decades of compressed anger, of swallowed words, of small humiliations and large betrayals, all of it finally has a target. All of it finally has somewhere to go. Richard waits until we're completely alone, until the hallway stretches empty in both directions, the sounds of the reception muffled by thick walls and closed doors. When he speaks, his voice is low and venomous, intimate in its cruelty. "You think you're so smart coming here making a fool of me in front of everyone." He takes a step toward me, invading my space in that way powerful men do when they want to intimidate. "You think your little company makes you someone. You think money and a title change what you are." He's close enough now that I can smell the champagne on his breath, see the broken capillaries in his nose, the age spots on his hands. "You're nothing, Evelyn. You've always been nothing, and tonight you just proved you're vindictive and small." The words are designed to cut, to reduce me back to that 18-year-old girl who left with a suitcase and $200. Back to the child who believed every cruel thing he said about her. But I'm not that girl anymore. I don't back away. I hold my ground, plant my feet, and meet his eyes with a steadiness I've earned through years of facing down hostile boardrooms and skeptical investors. "I didn't come here to humiliate you," I say, and my voice comes out cold as ice, sharp as a blade. "I came hoping foolishly, naively, that maybe you'd changed. That maybe you'd see me after 15 years and feel even a shred of regret for how you treated me." Richard laughs, and it's an ugly sound, bitter and mocking. "Regret for what?" "For trying to teach you humility. For trying to save you from yourself." His words are slurred slightly, the alcohol loosening his tongue but not his inhibitions. "You were always difficult, Evelyn. Always thought you were better than everyone else. Always so serious, so judgmental. Just like—" He stops abruptly, his mouth snapping shut as if he's bitten his own tongue. I see something flicker across his face. Fear, maybe? Or recognition that he was about to cross a line he can't uncross. "Just like what, Dad?" I press, stepping closer now, sensing weakness. "Say it. Just like who?" But he won't finish the sentence. Whatever he was about to reveal, whatever comparison he was about to make, he swallows it back down. I can see his jaw working, his throat moving as he forces the words back where they came from. Instead, he switches tactics, reaching for a different weapon in his arsenal of cruelty. "That money Wallace gave you," he says, and there's something almost desperate in the way he's searching for ammunition. "You think you earned it. You think you're self-made. Please. You were gifted everything, handed opportunities because Wallace Cole pitied you. Poor little orphan Evelyn, so tragic, so abandoned." The words are precisely calibrated to hurt, to undermine everything I've accomplished, to make my success about charity rather than merit. "Even your success is borrowed," he finishes, and I can see the satisfaction in his eyes when he sees me flinch. Because for just a moment, just a heartbeat, the old voice resurfaces. The voice that's lived in my head since childhood, the voice that sounds suspiciously like my father's. Maybe he's right. Maybe you're not enough. Maybe everything you've built is an illusion. But then I think of Wallace. Not the mysterious benefactor, not the man with secrets I'm only beginning to understand, but the mentor who taught me how to read a balance sheet, how to negotiate from a position of strength, how to turn every disadvantage into leverage. I think of the 16-hour days, the warehouse floors I walked at 4 a.m, the contracts I won not because of connections, but because I did the work and knew the numbers better than anyone else in the room. I think of the empire I built with my own hands, brick by brick, decision by decision. And I find my strength. "You know what, Dad?" I say, and my voice is steady now, certain. "You're right about one thing. I did have help. Wallace believed in me when no one else did. He opened doors that were closed to me. But everything I built myself. I step closer to him now, and for the first time in my entire life I see my father back up. Just slightly, just an inch, but it's there. He's retreating from me. My company is mine. My reputation is mine. My success is mine. I earned every dollar, every contract, every achievement. And you? I let the question hang in the air. You tried to destroy me. You tried to make me believe I was worthless. You tried to steal my future before I even had a chance to live it. My voice drops lower, more intense. And you failed. Richard's face contorts with rage, his carefully maintained control shattering like glass. You want to know the truth, Evelyn. The truth is... But then he stops. Again. His face goes pale, all the color draining out of it like someone pulled a plug. His eyes widen slightly, and I can see the moment of realization the instant he understands he's about to say something he can never take back. What? I demand, pressing the advantage. Tell me, what's the truth, Dad? But Richard is shaking his head and suddenly he looks old, tired, all the rage deflating out of him like air from a punctured tire. You're not my daughter anymore, he says quietly, and there's something in his voice I can't quite identify. Grief. Relief. You haven't been for a long time. He turns to walk away to retreat back into the safety of the reception and his remaining illusions. But then he pauses, looks back over his shoulder. Stay away from your mother, he says. Stay away from Noreen. You've done enough damage. And then he's walking away, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway, leaving me standing alone with more questions than answers, with half-truths and almost confessions hanging in the air like smoke. He walked away before telling the truth, but I was done waiting for his version of it. I call a car service from my phone, standing alone in that hallway where my father just walked away from me for what I suspect will be the last time. I don't go back into the reception. I don't say goodbye to anyone. I just leave, slipping out a side entrance like the ghost I've always been to this family. By the time I reach my hotel room, it's nearly midnight. I should be exhausted, I am exhausted, but sleep feels impossible. My mind won't stop replaying the evening, every revelation, every shocked face, every word spoken and unspoken. I sit by the window in the armchair, still wearing my navy dress, and watch the city lights gradually fade as dawn approaches. Wallace's letter sits in my lap, still sealed, still holding secrets. I'm not ready to face. What more could there possibly be? What truth could be worse than what I already know? The sky shifts from black to deep blue to pale pink. Sunday morning arrives whether I'm ready for it or not. I should shower, change, check out, go home. But I just sit there paralyzed by the weight of too many truths revealed too quickly. At 7 o'clock exactly, someone knocks on my door. I consider not answering. It's probably housekeeping or someone from the front desk. But something makes me stand, makes me walk to the door, makes me look through the peephole. It's Noreen. Not the radiant bride from last night. Not the perfect daughter in her designer gown. This Noreen wears faded jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face is completely bare of makeup, and her eyes are so red and swollen from crying that she looks almost unrecognizable. I open the door slowly, uncertain. I left, she says before I can speak. Her voice is hoarse, raw. Left the wedding, left James at the venue, left everything. I need to talk to you before I lose my courage. I should probably tell her to go away. Should probably protect myself from whatever new pain she's about to inflict. But I step aside and let her in because despite everything, she's still my sister. Or at least she was supposed to be. We sit across from each other, me in the armchair by the window, her perched on the edge of the bed. The space between us feels vast, unbridgeable. Two strangers who happen to share DNA and trauma, but no actual relationship. No history of late-night talks or shared secrets or sister solidarity. Just absence and hurt, and years of practiced avoidance. Noreen is shaking. Her hands twist together in her lap, and she can't seem to meet my eyes. I don't know where to start, she whispers. I'm still guarded, still protecting myself. Start with why you treated me the way you did. Start with why you let them erase me. She flinches like I've slapped her, takes a breath so deep and shuddering I can hear it across the room. Because I knew something you didn't, she says. Something I've carried for 10 years and it's destroyed me. She reaches into her bag, a canvas tote, not the designer clutch from last night, and pulls out a piece of paper. Folded, yellowed with age, the creases worn soft from being opened and closed countless times. When I was 16, she begins, her voice barely audible, I was looking for my birth certificate. I needed it for a passport application. Mom told me it was in Dad's safe in his study. She gave me the combination. She unfolds the paper slowly like it might bite her. I found my birth certificate, but underneath it I found this. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it was private, but I did. I looked. She holds it out to me and I take it with numb fingers. It's a medical document, a laboratory report. The letterhead says, Gene Diagnostic Testing Laboratory. The date is October 2002, 23 years ago, when I was 5 years old. My eyes scan the page, catching on phrases, paternity test results. Sample A, Richard Cole. Sample B, Evelyn Cole. Genetic markers analyzed. Conclusion. And then I see it. The words that make the entire room tilt sideways. Richard Cole is not the biological father of Evelyn Cole. Probability of paternity, 0%. My hands go completely numb. The paper slips from my fingers and flutters to the floor. I can't breathe, can't think, can't process what I'm seeing. What? The word comes out as barely more than a whisper. Noreen is crying now, tears streaming down her already swollen face. You're not his biological daughter, Evelyn, and I've known since I was 16. I've lived with that secret for 10 years, watching him treat you horribly, knowing why, but not understanding why it justified his cruelty. I stare at her, my brain trying and failing to make sense of this. Not his daughter. The man who raised me, who I spent 18 years trying to please, whose approval I desperately sought, he knew. He knew I wasn't his, and he treated me like an intruder in my own family because that's exactly what I was. When did he... I start, but my voice breaks. The test is dated October 2002. You were 5. I don't know what triggered it, what made him suspicious, but he tested, you got the results, and... She trails off, gesturing helplessly at the reality we both know. He never told Mom he knew, or maybe she knew all along. I don't know, but he never told you. Why didn't you tell me? The question bursts out of me, raw and desperate. Why didn't you say something 10 years, Noreen? You knew for 10 years. Her answer, when it comes, is brutally honest. Maybe the most honest thing anyone in my family has ever said to me. Because I was a selfish, jealous child, she says, her voice thick with self-loathing. When I found out you had a different father, a real father out there somewhere, I wasn't sympathetic. I was furious. She wipes her face with her sleeve, a gesture so unlike the polished Noreen I've always known. I thought she has 2 fathers, and I only have 1. And he barely loves either of us, but he loves her even less. In my sick, twisted teenage mind, I thought that made me the winner, like it was a competition I'd finally won. I can't speak, can't move, can only listen as she dismantles the last of her careful facade. I hated you, she continues, and the words hit like physical blows. I hated you for having another option, another family out there that I didn't even know about. I thought if I could just be perfect enough, good enough, everything Dad wanted, then he'd love me the way he never loved you. She covers her face with her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs. So I became everything he wanted. Social, pretty, compliant, perfect. I let you be the scapegoat because it kept his attention off me. I watched him destroy you, and I said nothing because it meant he wasn't destroying me. She drops her hands, and her face is a mess of tears and regret and pain. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything. All I did was become a prisoner to his expectations. I've spent 15 years performing perfection, and I'm so tired. And I let my sister, my only sister, suffer for it because I was too much of a coward to stand up for you. The silence that follows is deafening. I don't know what to say, how to process this confession layered on top of the DNA revelation. My father isn't my father. My sister has known for a decade. Nothing about my family, about my identity, is what I thought it was. I look down at the DNA test on the floor, at the definitive proof that I'm not a Cole by blood. And suddenly I understand so much. The distance, the cruelty, the way Richard looked at me like I was a stranger in his house. Because that's exactly what I was. But if Richard isn't my father, then who is? My eyes drift to Wallace's letter, still sitting on the armchair where I left it. The envelope that's supposed to explain everything. She knew I wasn't our father's daughter, but she didn't know who my real father was. And neither did I. Until I finally opened Wallace's letter. I reach for Wallace's envelope, but Noreen puts a hand on my arm. Not yet, she says quietly. I think we both need air first. Let's walk. She's right. The hotel room suddenly feels suffocating. The walls too close, the recycled air not enough. I fold the DNA test carefully and slip it into my pocket, grab my room key, and follow my sister out into the hallway. We take the elevator down in silence, walk through the lobby where the morning shift workers are just arriving, and step out onto the city streets. It's early Sunday morning and the sidewalks are mostly empty. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the smell of coffee from a nearby cafe and something floral from the planted trees lining the boulevard. We walk without destination, without plan. Just walking because our bodies need to move, need to do something, while our minds try to process the impossible. This is the first real conversation we've had since we were children. Maybe the first real conversation we've ever had. My hand keeps going to my pocket, touching the folded paper there, as if checking to make sure it's real. That it actually says what I think it says. That my entire understanding of my identity hasn't just shifted on its axis. All those times Dad looked at me like he hated me, I say quietly, breaking the silence. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It's because I wasn't his. Noreen nods, her hands shoved deep in the pockets of her sweatshirt. I think he knew from the beginning. Mom must have lied to him, told him you were his. Or maybe he suspected from the start, and the test just confirmed it when you were 5. We walk another block in silence, past closed shops and early morning joggers. The normalcy of the city waking up feels surreal against the magnitude of what we're discussing. Do you remember when you were 5? Noreen asks. Was there anything that changed? Anything specific? I search my memory, reaching back through decades to that small child I was. 5 years old, kindergarten, the big Victorian house with the wraparound porch. That was the year he stopped tucking me in at night, I say, and the memory surfaces with painful clarity. He used to come to my room every night, read me a story, kiss my forehead. And then suddenly he just stopped. I remember because I kept waiting by my door for him. Night after night, I'd sit there in my pajamas waiting to hear his footsteps. And he just stopped coming. Noreen's breath catches. God, Evelyn. I thought I'd done something wrong. Thought if I was better, quieter, more perfect, he'd come back. I laugh, but it's hollow. I spent the next 13 years trying to figure out what I'd done to make him stop loving me. Turns out I hadn't done anything. I'd just been born. We turn a corner, walking past a park where early risers are walking their dogs. A man throwing a tennis ball for a golden retriever. A woman pushing a stroller. Life continuing oblivious to revelations that shatter worlds. Noreen starts sharing memories I never knew existed. Mom used to cry at night. I'd hear her through the walls, especially when I was young. Sometimes she'd say your name, Evelyn, Evelyn. I thought she was sad because you were difficult because you didn't fit into our family the way she wanted. But now I think... She pauses, her voice thick. Now I think she was drowning in guilt. Her words trigger my own memories pieces clicking into place with this new context. Mom was always strange about college, I say. Whenever I got excited about school, about academics, she'd shut down or get angry. I never understood why my success seemed to hurt her, why my intelligence felt like an attack on her. We're beginning to see our mother not as a simple villain, but as something more complex, someone carrying her own pain, her own secrets. But we don't understand the full picture yet. There's more to this story, I say. The missing Harvard letter, the way Mom always seemed, not just cold, but conflicted, like she was at war with herself about me. Noreen nods slowly. We need to find out what really happened, the whole truth, not just pieces. She stops walking and turns to face me, her expression serious. But there's something else first. She takes a breath. Who is your biological father? And just like that, we're back to the central question. The envelope in my hotel room. The truth waiting to be revealed. We walk back to the hotel in silence, both of us knowing what comes next. The moment we've been building toward since yesterday when James handed me that envelope in front of 200 witnesses. Back in my room, I pick up Wallace's letter with trembling hands. The envelope feels heavier than paper should, weighted with truth and consequence. I think I already know, I whisper to Noreen. The way he looked at me. The way he invested so much in me when he had no reason to. The way he made James promise to tell me the truth. I break the seal and my hands are shaking so badly that Noreen has to help me. Inside is a handwritten letter, Wallace's distinctive, elegant script covering several pages and a USB drive. I unfold the letter and begin to read, but my eyes blur with tears almost immediately. The first sentence is enough to confirm what my heart already suspected. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, I am gone, and you are finally ready to know the truth about who you are, where you came from, and why I could never tell you directly. I can't continue. My throat closes, and I have to hand the letter to Noreen before I drop it. She takes it, gently, sits beside me on the bed, and continues reading aloud, her voice soft and steady. I am your biological father. Your mother, Margaret, was the love of my young life, but circumstances pulled us apart. We were too young from different worlds, and her family had other plans for her. When I learned she was pregnant with you, she begged me to stay away to let you grow up in a normal family without the scandal of being born outside her marriage. I agreed because I thought it was best for you. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped watching over you. Both of us are crying now, tears streaming freely. I'm crying for the father I never knew I had, for Wallace who watched me from a distance for 38 years. For the relationship we could have had if the truth had been different. He was my father, I whisper, and saying it out loud makes it real. All this time he was my father. Noreen wraps an arm around my shoulders and we sit there crying together, grieving together for the first time in our lives, acting like actual sisters. But then Noreen's voice changes as she continues reading. Wait, she says. There's more. She reads the next paragraph, and I feel my blood run cold. But the letter continued. There's one more thing you need to know, something your mother did that I only discovered after it was too late. Noreen and I stare at those words for a long time. Something your mother did that I only discovered after it was too late. The USB drive sits on the bed between us, small and black, and containing truths we're not sure we're ready to face. Not today, I say finally. I can't. Not yet. Noreen nods understanding. When you're ready. It takes 2 weeks before I'm ready. 2 weeks of going back to work trying to focus on quarterly reports and logistics contracts while my mind keeps circling back to that USB drive, 2 weeks of Noreen calling me daily, checking in, building a relationship we never had before. 2 weeks of carrying Wallace's letter in my bag like a talisman, proof that I'm someone's daughter, even if not the daughter I thought I was. Finally, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I call Noreen. "Come over," I say. "It's time." She arrives within an hour. We set up my laptop on the coffee table, insert the USB drive, and click on the single video file. The screen fills with Wallace's face, and seeing him alive again, even knowing this was recorded months ago when he was already dying, makes my breath catch. He sits in his home office, the one with the leather chairs and wall of books I remember from my years working for him. He's clearly ill. His face is gaunt, his skin has a grayish pallor, but his eyes are sharp and clear, determined. "Evelyn," he begins, and just hearing him say my name makes tears spring to my eyes. "If you're watching this, you've read my letter. You know I'm your father. But there's more to the story, and you deserve to know all of it." He takes a breath, gathering himself. "I need to tell you about your mother. About Margaret." His voice softens with old affection. "We met in 1978. We were both 18 years old. She was brilliant, Evelyn, truly brilliant. She got accepted to Harvard, an incredible achievement, especially for a woman from her background at that time. But her family was traditional wealthy, and they'd already arranged her marriage to Richard Cole, who came from the right social circle, the right connections." Wallace's voice grows heavy with old pain, regret that's had 47 years to calcify. "Margaret's mother told her, and I quote, 'Smart women make unhappy wives. You'll refuse Harvard and marry Richard.' And Margaret came to me crying, begging me to run away with her. She wanted to choose love over duty, education over expectation." He closes his eyes briefly. "But I was nobody then. No money, no prospects, just a kid from a working-class family with dreams of starting a business someday. And I was too much of a coward to fight for her. I let her go." I feel Noreen's hand find mine, squeezing tightly. 2 years later, in 1980, Margaret married Richard as planned. I heard about it and I tried to move on with my life. Wallace opens his eyes and they're bright with unshed tears. But 7 years into that dead marriage, in early 1987, she found me. I'd built my company by then, become someone, and she tracked me down. We had 1 month together. 1 stolen month where we pretended we could start over, where we let ourselves believe that maybe it wasn't too late. He pauses, collecting himself. Then she went back to him. Back to her marriage, her obligations, her life. And 3 months later, she called me. She was pregnant. With you, Evelyn. With my daughter. The video continues, but Wallace's tone changes, becomes harder, more factual. "In 2023, 2 years ago, I hired a private investigator. I wanted to check on you to make sure you were thriving. In the process, he uncovered something I never suspected." My heart starts pounding. This is it. The something more. "Evelyn, when you applied to Harvard in 2003, you were accepted with a full scholarship, but the acceptance letter never reached you. It was intercepted." The screen changes. Now we're looking at a photocopy of a letter. I lean forward, reading the letterhead, Harvard University Office of Admissions. The date, April 15th, 2003. And there, in official type, "Dear Ms. Evelyn Cole, we are pleased to inform you of your acceptance." My hands fly to my mouth. I was accepted. I was accepted. My investigator tracked the mail records. Wallace's voice continues over the image, and he found something else. A journal entry. A confession of sorts. The screen changes again, and now I'm looking at a page from a diary. The handwriting is unmistakably my mother's. I'd recognize that elegant script anywhere. The date at the top reads May 3rd, 2003. Wallace reads it aloud. "I took Evelyn's Harvard letter today. The same school that was supposed to be my salvation is now calling to her. I can't let her have what I lost. I can't watch her succeed where I failed. I told Richard she wants to drop out and get married like a foolish girl. He believed me. God forgive me, I've destroyed my daughter's future because I can't face my own past." The room spins. I can't breathe. Can't process this. Not my father, my mother. My mother stole my acceptance letter. My mother lied to my father about me. My mother destroyed my future because she couldn't face her own regrets. The video returns to Wallace's face. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I'm so sorry. If I had known sooner, I would have intervened. But by the time I discovered this, you'd already built your empire. You'd already succeeded despite her, and I didn't want to burden you with this truth while you were thriving. But you deserve to know. You deserve to understand why she treated you the way she did. The video ends. The screen goes black. Noreen and I sit in absolute silence. I feel like I've been hit by a truck, like every bone in my body has been pulverized and reassembled wrong. It wasn't Dad, Noreen says finally, her voice barely a whisper. It was Mom. All this time we thought he was the villain. My voice comes out hollow, distant, like it's coming from underwater. She stole my future because she couldn't face her own regrets. She destroyed me to avoid being reminded of what she gave up. And this betrayal cuts so much deeper than anything Richard ever did. Because he was never supposed to love me, I wasn't his daughter. But she was my mother. She was supposed to protect me, to champion me, to want better for me than she had for herself. Instead, she saw my potential as a threat, my intelligence as an insult, my success as proof of her failure. Noreen pulls out her phone, her fingers already moving. We need to talk to her, now. She needs to answer for this. But I reach out and stop her hand. Not yet. First, we need to see the complete picture. Wallace said there was more. I pick up the letter again, find the final paragraph we hadn't finished reading. My hands shake as I read Wallace's words aloud. Evelyn, your mother is not a villain. She's a victim who created another victim. Forgive her if you cannot for her sake, but for yours. As for your father who raised you, Richard knew about me from the beginning. I don't know when or how he found out, but he knew. And he chose to stay to raise you anyway. His cruelty came from pain, not from malice. This doesn't excuse him, but perhaps it explains him. I've left resources for you both, you and Noreen. Use them wisely. Build something better than what we built. Wallace. The letter ends there, but the story doesn't. It can't. Not with this knowledge burning in my chest, demanding to be addressed. My mother destroyed my future to avoid facing her past, but the truth was about to destroy hers. Within an hour, Noreen and I are in my car driving toward the house I grew up in, the house I haven't seen in 15 years, the house that holds every painful memory of my childhood preserved like specimens in amber. The drive takes 40 minutes through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods past manicured lawns and iron gates until we reach the street I once called home. The Grand Victorian stands exactly as I remember it, 3 stories of pale yellow paint and white trim wraparound porch with ornate railings, the roses my mother always obsessed over climbing the lattice. It looks like a postcard, like something from a magazine about gracious living. Frozen in time. A museum of painful memories. Dad's at the office, Noreen says quietly as we pull up. Still trying to salvage his business relationships after the wedding. Mom's alone. Good. I want her alone. This conversation doesn't need Richard's defensiveness, his rage, his attempts to control the narrative. We walk up the front steps together, and I'm surprised my legs are steady. I feel like I should be shaking, should be falling apart. But instead, I feel something cold and hard settling in my chest. Clarity. Purpose. Noreen rings the doorbell. We wait. When the door opens, Margaret stands there in casual slacks and a silk blouse, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looks older than she did at the wedding. The stress of the scandal has taken its toll. But she still looks every inch the society matron perfectly put together, even at home on a Sunday afternoon. She sees Noreen first, and relief flashes across her face. Then her eyes land on me, standing just behind my sister, and all the color drains from her face like someone pulled a plug. Noreen, what are you? She begins, but I cut her off. We need to talk, Mom, about Harvard, about Wallace, about everything you took from me. Her legs seem to give out slightly. She reaches for the doorframe, gripping it so hard her knuckles go white. "You know," she whispers. It's not a question. It's a statement of defeat, of inevitability, of a truth that's finally caught up to her. She steps aside wordlessly, and we walk into the house. It smells the same furniture polish and the vanilla candles my mother always burned, and something floral from the arrangements on every surface. Everything is exactly as I remember. The antique side table with the Tiffany lamp, the family portraits on the walls, portraits that include Noreen, but carefully exclude me. The formal living room to the right where we had so many uncomfortable family dinners where I learned to make myself small and quiet and invisible. Margaret leads us into that room, moving like someone walking to her own execution. She doesn't offer tea or coffee, doesn't try to make small talk, just sits heavily in one of the wingback chairs and waits. I pull the diary pages from my bag, copies Wallace's investigator made, and the photocopy of my Harvard acceptance letter. I place them on the coffee table between us with deliberate care, arranging them so my mother can see every word. Margaret stares at them, her hands trembling visibly in her lap. "How did you—" she begins, her voice barely audible. "Wallace kept investigating even after his death, apparently," I say, and my voice is carefully controlled despite the tears streaming down my face. I won't let anger take over. I need her to hear every word. "Why, Mom? Why would you do that to your own daughter?" She sits there for a long moment, staring at the evidence of her betrayal. Then she seems to collapse inward, her shoulders curving, her spine bending. She ages 10 years in front of my eyes. When she finally speaks, her voice is small and broken. "Because every time I looked at you, I saw everything I gave up. My intelligence, my potential, my dreams. I gave them all away to be the perfect wife, the perfect society woman. And then you, brilliant, determined, you came along with the same opportunities I'd had, and I couldn't bear it." She looks up at me with red-rimmed eyes, mascara smudged from tears she's been crying. "I told myself I was protecting you from disappointment from the academic world that would chew you up and spit you out. But the truth—" her voice cracks. "I was jealous. Jealous of my own daughter." The words hang in the air like poison gas. Noreen speaks up, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Do you have any idea what you did? Evelyn left home with nothing. She built herself from scratch because you made her believe she wasn't good enough for anything else." Margaret nods, and tears are flowing freely now, ruining her careful makeup. "I know. I've known for years. Every time I saw a story about coal logistics, every time someone mentioned the Iron Dove, I knew it was her. And I knew what I'd taken from her." She looks at me directly for the first time, really looks at me, and I see in her face something I've never seen before. Not love, not pride, but recognition of the enormity of what she's done. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I destroyed your future because I was too weak to face my own past. Everything you achieved despite me, not because of me." I stand up abruptly, unable to sit any longer, unable to be still while rage and grief war inside my chest. "You're right," I say, and my voice comes out hard, sharp. "You don't deserve forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever." My voice breaks on the last word, and I have to pause, have to breathe, have to force myself to continue. "You were supposed to be my mother. You were supposed to protect me, guide me, support me. Instead, you used me as a repository for your own failures." Margaret opens her mouth to speak, but I hold up my hand. I'm not finished. "I'm not done. Wallace told me you were a victim too, that you were forced into a life you didn't choose. And maybe that's true. Maybe your mother crushed your dreams the same way you crushed mine, but you had a choice when it came to me, and you chose to repeat the cycle instead of breaking it." The silence that follows is absolute. Margaret sits with her face in her hands, sobbing openly now, all pretense of composure gone. Noreen stands beside me, her hand finding mine squeezing tight. I take one last look around the formal living room, at the portraits on the walls, at the expensive furniture and the tasteful decorations, and all the trappings of a life built on lies and regrets and sacrificed dreams. This isn't my home. It never was. Come on, Noreen, I say quietly. We're done here. We walk out together, leaving our mother crying in that perfect room in that perfect house, surrounded by all the beautiful things that were supposed to make her happy, but never did. I walked out of that house without looking back, but the past wasn't done with us yet. A month passes. A month of Noreen and me building something that resembles sisterhood, of work that feels meaningless now that I know the foundation it's built on, of nights lying awake wondering who I really am, if not the self-made woman I thought I was. Then Wallace's attorney calls. Ms. Cole, could you come to my office? There are additional estate matters we need to discuss. I drive to his downtown office on a sweltering July afternoon, the air conditioning in my car barely keeping up with the heat. Mr. Henderson greets me with somber professionalism and leads me to a conference room where a laptop sits ready on the polished table. Mr. Cole left a complete video message, he explains. What you saw on the USB drive was an excerpt. This is the full recording. 1 hour. He wanted you to see everything when you were ready. He leaves me alone with the laptop, and I press play. Wallace appears on screen, and I'm struck again by how ill he looks, how determined. This must have taken every ounce of energy he had left. Margaret and I were 18, reckless and completely in love. He begins, and his voice carries me back to a time before I existed, to a love story that created me. When her family tore us apart, I thought I'd never recover. I threw myself into building a business empire, thinking success would fill the hole she left. It didn't. He tells me everything. How Margaret called him in late 1987, 3 months after their affair ended, crying as she told him she was pregnant. She begged me not to interfere. She said Richard believed you were his, and any scandal would destroy everyone her marriage. Richard's reputation, and most importantly, you. She made me promise to stay away, but I couldn't just do nothing, so I became a silent guardian. Tears stream down Wallace's face on screen, and mine mirror his. Evelyn, you are my daughter, my only child, and the greatest regret of my life is that I never got to call you that out loud. Then he shifts, becomes more businesslike, and begins listing dates and actions like he's presenting a case file. When you were 8 years old in 1995, I established a $500,000 trust fund through Richard, designating it specifically for your education. I thought I was securing your future. I didn't know Richard was already embezzling from it to save his failing company. A shadow passes over his face, anger mixing with regret. When you left home at 18, I had a private investigator track you not to invade your privacy, but to ensure you were safe. When I learned you were struggling, sleeping in hostels, running out of money, I arranged for us to meet at that coffee shop. My stomach drops. The coffee shop. Our meeting. Not chance. Never chance. Wallace continues methodical now. Your first job was real. You earned that position through your interview. But I made sure my company had an opening when you needed it. The networking introductions over the years, those were orchestrated. The big contract in 2012 that made your company, I called in favors to get you the meeting, but you won that contract entirely on your own merit. They chose you because you were the best, not because I asked them to. The video ends, the screen goes black, and I sit there in that conference room feeling like my entire identity has been built on sand. Mr. Henderson returns, sees my face, and quietly exits again. I pull out my phone and call Noreen. Can you come? I need you. She arrives within an hour, finds me still sitting in that conference room, staring at nothing. He manipulated everything. I say, my voice flat, emotionless. My whole life has been a story, he wrote. But Noreen sits beside me and takes my hand. No, He opened doors. You walked through them. He got you the meeting, you won the contract. He introduced you to people, you impressed them enough to invest in your company. He gave you opportunities, you turned them into an empire. I shake my head, but she squeezes my hand tighter. Wallace gave you what Mom and Dad never did a chance. What you did with it was all you. I want to argue, want to insist my success is tainted, but slowly, painfully, the truth begins to sink in. Wallace didn't buy my success. He didn't hand me an empire. He just made sure the world didn't break me before I could prove myself. He gave me opportunities, yes, but I still had to be good enough, smart enough, determined enough to turn those opportunities into something real. There's a difference between unearned privilege and being given a fair shot. I was his daughter, and now I had to decide what that meant for everything I thought I knew about myself. I decide I need time. Time away from the company, from the city, from everything that reminds me of who I thought I was. For the first time in 10 years, I take a vacation. A real one, not a working retreat or a business conference disguised as time off. I drive to Wallace's lakeside cabin, a place he'd taken me once years ago for what he called a mentorship retreat. It's 3 hours north, nestled among pine trees with a dock that stretches out over crystal clear water. Wallace left it to me in his will along with boxes of his personal journals. I spend my days reading those journals, sitting on the dock with my feet dangling over the water, diving into the mind of the man who was my father. The entries span decades, starting from when he was young and ambitious, documenting his rise in business, his heartbreak over Margaret, his quiet monitoring of my life from the shadows. One entry from 2015 stops me cold. Today, Evelyn won the Logistics Industry Innovation Award. She doesn't know I was in the audience. She stood on that stage poised and confident, everything I'd hoped she'd become. Margaret called me tonight. She'd seen the ceremony on C-SPAN. She cried. She said, "We lost the best part of ourselves." I told her it's not too late to reach out. She hung up. My mother watched me succeed and felt loss. Wallace watched me succeed and felt pride. And Richard watched me succeed and felt, what rage, vindication, that his cruelty hadn't broken me, relief that I was no longer his problem. Slowly, as the days pass, and I read more, a picture emerges. All three of them, Wallace, Margaret, and Richard, have been prisoners of choices made decades ago. Wallace chose cowardice over love. Margaret chose duty over dreams. Richard chose to stay in a marriage built on lies. And I've been collateral damage, caught in the crossfire of their regrets. Noreen visits every weekend, driving up Friday evenings and staying until Sunday. Our relationship is healing, becoming real for the first time. We're learning to be sisters, not competitors or strangers, but actual sisters who share history and DNA and trauma. One Saturday evening, sitting on the dock watching the sunset, Noreen says something that reframes everything. "I used to wonder why Mom was so hard on both of us, cold to you, smothering to me. Now I understand she was projecting her regrets onto you and her desperate need to fix her mistakes onto me. We were never just daughters. We were symbols of everything she'd lost and everything she was trying to save. We talk for hours about forgiveness, whether it's even possible, whether it's necessary, whether we owe it to them or to ourselves. Part of me wants to burn everything down, make them feel what I felt. I admit, but Wallace's last words keep echoing, "Build something better than what we built." Noreen looks at me seriously. What does that look like? I don't have an answer yet, but I'm working toward one. By late August, something has shifted inside me. Clarity maybe, or just exhaustion with carrying so much anger. I call a meeting with Wallace's attorney Noreen and James, who's been helping us navigate the legal complexities of Wallace's estate while finalizing his annulment from Noreen. We meet at Mr. Henderson's office on a Tuesday afternoon. They all look at me expectantly, waiting to hear what I've decided. I've decided what I'm going to do with Wallace's estate and his legacy. I begin. I'm going to use it to build something that breaks the cycle. A foundation for women, Women who've had their futures stolen by family expectations, by circumstances, by people who were supposed to protect them. It will fund education, business development therapy, whatever they need to rewrite their stories. I turned to Noreen. I want you to co-found it with me. 2 daughters who were pitted against each other now working together to help other women avoid that fate. Noreen's eyes fill with tears. Yes, absolutely yes. James nods approvingly. Wallace would have loved that. Mr. Henderson begins taking notes, already thinking about the legal structure we'll need. But I'm not finished. There's one more thing I need to do, one more conversation I need to have. And I'm going to confront Dad one more time, not for revenge, but to offer him something he doesn't deserve a chance at redemption. Noreen looks worried. Are you sure? After everything he's done? I'm sure. Wallace taught me that grace is power, that the strongest thing you can do is offer mercy to people who don't deserve it. Not for them, for yourself. I start making plans, rehearsing what I'll say, preparing myself emotionally for one final confrontation with the man who raised me, who rejected me, who I now understand was suffering his own private hell. I was ready to face my past, but I wasn't prepared for what my father would face first. I return from the cabin in early September, ready to face whatever comes next. But fate, it seems, has its own timeline. The call comes from Noreen on a Tuesday morning. Evelyn, turn on the news. Dad's company is being investigated. I pull up the local news website and there it is. Coal development under federal investigation for financial fraud. The IRS and state financial regulators have formally opened an investigation into Richard's company. But here's the thing, I didn't trigger it. I haven't spoken to authorities, haven't filed complaints, haven't lifted a finger against him. James did. Or rather, his public confession at the wedding did. When he stood up and revealed Richard's attempt to access Wallace's estate illegally, Wallace's attorney had no choice but to file reports with proper authorities. It was his legal obligation. And once the forensic accountants started examining Richard's business records, they found everything. The embezzlement from my trust fund in 2005, $500,000, meant for my education diverted to save his failing real estate development company. Forged documents, falsified financial statements, breach of fiduciary duty. The evidence is overwhelming, damning, irrefutable. Richard faces federal charges carrying 5 to 10 years in prison. Within days, his carefully constructed empire begins to crumble. Business partners issue statements distancing themselves from him. Major clients pull their contracts citing ethical concerns. His name, once synonymous with success and respectability, becomes toxic overnight. My phone rings. It's my mother and she's crying. Evelyn, they're going to take everything. The house, the savings, everything we built. Her voice is desperate pleading. Can't you do something? Can't you talk to them? My response comes out colder than I intend. You mean everything you built on stolen money and lies? She hangs up without another word. The public fall is spectacularly brutal. The same newspapers that once published glowing profiles of Richard's business acumen now run exposés about his fraud. Real estate mogul embezzled daughter's trust fund, reads one headline above the fold. Society family's dark secret CEO, father stole from his own child, declares another. Richard, who once commanded respect at country clubs and charity galas, who held court at the best tables in the best restaurants, is now openly shunned. Noreen tells me she saw one of his oldest friends cross the street to avoid him. Business associates won't return his calls. At Morrison's, the upscale restaurant where he'd been a regular for 20 years, the host quietly informed him they were fully booked for the foreseeable future, despite half the dining room sitting empty. The social death, I realize, is worse for him than any legal punishment could be. Richard values reputation above all else. Always has. And now that reputation is destroyed, ground into dust under the weight of his own actions, Margaret stands by him, whether out of loyalty, fear, or simple inability to imagine an alternative, I don't know. but she watches her own carefully curated social world crumble around her. Women she's had lunch with for decades suddenly have scheduling conflicts. She's quietly removed from charity boards. The humiliation is comprehensive and complete. I should feel triumphant. This is justice karma consequences finally catching up. But mostly, I just feel tired. Then Mr. Henderson calls. "Ms. Cole, something has come to light in the investigation. Richard's personal files were seized by investigators, and they found a letter. It's part of the prosecution's evidence now, but I thought you should see it." He emails me a scanned copy. It's a letter addressed to Wallace, handwritten in my father's, Richard's, distinctive script, dated 2005, never sent. I read it once, then again, my hands trembling. "Wallace, I know you're Evelyn's biological father. I've known since she was 5 years old a routine blood type test during a medical emergency revealed the impossibility of her being mine. I had a DNA test done to confirm. For 20 years I've raised another man's child, a living reminder of my wife's betrayal. I took the trust fund money you sent. Call it payment for services rendered for giving your daughter a home, a name, for sparing her the shame of being illegitimate. You owe me that much." The letter was never sent. Richard couldn't risk exposing the truth, couldn't risk the scandal. But he wrote it, kept it, carried this knowledge for decades. He knew. From the very beginning he knew. Every cold look, every cruel word, every moment of rejection. Every time he turned away from me, refused to acknowledge my achievements, told me I was worthless. It was because he saw me not as an innocent child deserving of love, but as evidence of his humiliation. Living proof that his wife had betrayed him, that his marriage was a lie, that he wasn't man enough to keep her faithful. I sit at my desk staring at the letter, and something fundamental shifts inside me. Richard isn't just cruel. He's broken. Has been broken for 33 years, poisoned by knowledge he couldn't share, eaten alive by resentment he couldn't express without destroying his own carefully constructed life. It doesn't excuse what he did. But for the first time, I understand it. My father knew the truth for 33 years, and now he would finally have to face me with nothing left to hide behind. Richard's sentencing hearing is scheduled for December, 6 months after the wedding that changed everything. I debate whether to go. Noreen decides she can't. The pain is still too raw, the betrayal too fresh. "I can't watch him be destroyed even though he deserves it," she tells me. "Does that make me weak?" "It makes you human," I say. "But I need to be there. Need to see this through to whatever end awaits." The courtroom is packed. Reporters fill the gallery, cameras waiting outside for the perp walk. This case has become tabloid fodder. The society family brought low, the stolen trust fund, the illegitimate daughter who built an empire. It has all the elements of a scandal people can't look away from. Richard has pleaded guilty to embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty in exchange for a reduced sentence. 7 years in federal prison. At 67 years old, with his health already failing, it might as well be a life sentence. When they bring him in, I barely recognize him. His expensive suits hang loose on a frame that's lost too much weight. His hair, once distinguished silver, has gone completely white. His face is gaunt, shadowed, the face of a man who's already serving time in a prison of his own making. Margaret sits 3 rows ahead of me, her back rigid, her face carefully blank. She doesn't turn around, doesn't acknowledge my presence. We haven't spoken since that phone call in September. The proceedings move forward with bureaucratic efficiency. The charges are read. The guilty plea is entered into the record. Then the judge, a stern woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, asks if anyone wishes to make a victim impact statement. The prosecutor turns and looks directly at me. Everyone in the courtroom follows his gaze. They're all expecting me to stand up and deliver a damning indictment, to detail every hurt, every wound, every way this man destroyed me, to demand the maximum sentence. I stand slowly and walk to the front of the courtroom. Every eye follows me. The silence is absolute. "Your Honor," I say, my voice clear and steady, "I'd like to request leniency." The courtroom erupts. Whispers, gasps, confused murmurs rippling through the gallery. The prosecutor actually stands up. Your Honor, I must object. But the judge raises her hand. I'll allow Ms. Cole to continue. I take a breath and speak directly to the court, to the judge, to the reporters scribbling frantically in their notebooks. My father, Richard Cole, stole from me. Not just money, but security, opportunity, and the belief that I mattered. For 33 years, he treated me as a burden because I represented his pain, not because of anything I did. The hurt he caused was real. The damage was lasting. I pause, feeling my voice thicken with emotion I didn't know I was carrying. But I've learned something in the past 6 months. Hurt people hurt people. My father was hurt by betrayal, by circumstances he didn't create. He responded by perpetuating that hurt which was wrong. But that doesn't mean he deserves to die in prison. He's 67 years old. He has health issues. 7 years might be a death sentence. I turn and look at Richard directly for the first time. He's staring at me with an expression I've never seen on his face before. Not anger, not contempt, something closer to wonder. I'm requesting that the court reduce his sentence to probation and restitution on one condition: that he publicly apologizes not just to me, but to everyone he hurt through his actions. Full accountability. And that he spends his remaining years trying to make amends. The judge studies me for a long moment, then nods. Mr. Cole, you have an opportunity to address the court. Richard stands slowly, gripping the table for support. For the first time since the wedding, he looks at me without anger or contempt clouding his eyes. His voice shakes when he speaks. Evelyn, I don't deserve your mercy. You're right about everything you said. I was hurt, and I took it out on an innocent child, my daughter, in every way that should have mattered. I let my pride and my pain turn me into someone I don't recognize. He turns to face the courtroom, to face the reporters, and the curious onlookers, and the weight of his own actions. I stole from my daughter. I lied to my family. I abused my position and betrayed trusts given to me. There's no excuse. I can only say, I'm sorry, and I know that will never be enough. The judge considers for several minutes that feel like hours. Then she delivers her ruling: 5 years of strict probation, full restitution of $500,000 plus interest, 2,000 hours of community service, and mandatory therapy. Richard will lose his business and much of his wealth, but he won't die in prison. As the bailiff leads him out, Richard stops beside me. Just for a moment. Our eyes meet. Why? He asks simply. My answer comes out quiet but firm. Because Wallace taught me that grace is the loudest revenge, and because I want to build something better than what you built, and I can't do that carrying your weight. Something in his face breaks then, and for just a second I see the man he might have been if circumstances had been different, if love had won over duty, if pain hadn't poisoned everything it touched. He nods once and walks away. I gave him mercy, but I never imagined it would be the last time I'd see him alive. 3 months pass. 3 months of watching Richard fulfill his community service requirements, of seeing occasional updates from Noreen about how he's actually trying, actually showing up to build homes for low-income families, actually attending his therapy sessions. 3 months of wondering if mercy was the right choice, if grace really is powerful, or if I'm just naive. Then on a cold March night, my phone rings at 11 p.m. I see the caller ID Margaret. My heart drops before I even answer. Evelyn, your father had a heart attack this evening. He's gone. Her voice is eerily calm, flat, delivering facts without emotion. No emotion, just information. I feel numb. Not grief exactly. How do you grieve someone who hurt you so deeply, but a hollow sense of endings, of doors closing that can never be reopened. I drive to the hospital where they've taken his body. Margaret sits in the waiting room, staring at nothing. Her hands folded neatly in her lap like she's waiting for a dinner reservation. He was at his community service assignment, she explains in that same toneless voice, helping build homes for low-income families. He collapsed while carrying lumber. The paramedics said it was massive and instant. He didn't suffer. Despite everything, all the pain, all the cruelty, all the years of rejection, I think, at least he was trying to make amends at the end. At least he died doing something good. Margaret reaches into her purse and pulls out an envelope. They found this in his jacket pocket. It's addressed to you. Apparently, he'd been carrying it around for weeks. The envelope is worn, the edges soft from handling, as if Richard had picked it up and put it down repeatedly, unable to decide whether to send it, whether to finally say what needed to be said. I take it, but don't open it. Not here. Not with Margaret watching. Not in this sterile waiting room that smells of disinfectant and grief. I wait until I'm alone in my car in the parking garage before I break the seal. My hands shake as I unfold the pages, 3 sheets of paper covered in Richard's distinctive handwriting, shakier than I remember, but still legible. Evelyn, if you're reading this, I've likely passed without giving this to you in person, because I'm a coward to the end. I'm writing this to tell you things I should have said 33 years ago. I have to stop reading, have to breathe, have to prepare myself for whatever truth is coming. When you were 5, you needed an emergency blood transfusion after an accident. The hospital did a blood type test, and the results were impossible. Neither Margaret's blood type nor mine could have produced yours. I had a DNA test done privately. The results confirmed what I'd already suspected: you weren't mine biologically. I was devastated, angry, betrayed. But I had choices in how to respond. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the paper. I chose wrong. I chose to punish an innocent child for her mother's sins. Every time I looked at you, I saw my humiliation, my wife's betrayal, the man who took what was mine. I couldn't separate you from that pain. I couldn't love you the way you deserved because I couldn't get past my own hurt. The words blur as tears fill my eyes. This is the confirmation I've known was coming but hoped wasn't true. He knew. From the beginning he knew, and he chose cruelty. But then the letter continues and the tone shifts. But here's what I need you to know, Evelyn. I stayed. When I found out the truth, I could have left, divorced your mother, exposed everything. I could have sent you away or treated you even worse than I did. But I didn't. Because underneath all my anger and pain, I knew you were an innocent child who deserved a home. I wasn't a good father. I wasn't even an adequate father most of the time. But I was there. I put food on the table, paid for your school, kept a roof over your head. It was the bare minimum, and it doesn't excuse anything. But it's all I could give. I'm crying openly now, tears dropping onto the paper, smudging the ink. When I saw you at Noreen's wedding, successful, strong, graceful, I felt 2 things: devastation that you'd succeeded despite me and pride that you'd survived me. You were right about everything you said in court. But I want you to know, in my broken, insufficient way, I did love you. I just didn't know how to show it without it burning me. The final paragraph is almost illegible, written with a trembling hand. You're free of me now. Build your better world. Be the parent to others that I couldn't be to you. And know that my greatest regret, greater than the crimes, greater than the lost business, is that I wasted 38 years of knowing an extraordinary daughter. I'm sorry. Richard. Something falls out of the envelope onto my lap. A photograph, old and faded. I pick it up with shaking hands. It's Richard holding an infant me in a hospital room. The date stamped on the back reads October 1987. Before the DNA test. Before he knew. In the photo, he's looking down at baby me with genuine love and wonder, the expression every new father has when holding their child for the first time. Pure, untainted, full of hope. This is who he could have been. This is the father I might have had if circumstances had been different, if love had been stronger than pain. 3 fathers, 3 kinds of love, 3 kinds of loss, and I was left to make peace with all of it. Richard's funeral is a small affair. I attend, but don't speak. What would I say? The truth would be too complicated, and lies feel disrespectful to the man who in the end tried to be honest. I stand in the back, watch them lower the casket, and feel that hollow sense of closure that comes with death, final, irreversible, absolute. A month later, my mother calls. Evelyn, I'd like to meet. Not at the house. Somewhere neutral. We agree on a park bench near the waterfront, far from the houses that hold too many painful memories. When I arrive, I barely recognize her. Margaret has aged dramatically since Richard's death. Her hair, which she'd always kept carefully colored, is now completely gray. Her face is lined with grief and guilt, the careful facade of the society matron finally stripped away. She sits with a cardboard box on her lap, her hands resting on top of it protectively. I found something when I was going through Richard's things. She begins without preamble, without small talk or pleasantries. She opens the box and hands it to me. Inside are letters, dozens of them spanning decades, all addressed to Wallace Cole, all unsent. Richard wrote to Wallace periodically over the years. He never sent them, but he wrote them. Angry letters, bitter letters. But some of them... She trails off, unable to finish. I pull one out at random. It's dated 2010, written in Richard's careful handwriting. Wallace, I hate you for having what I couldn't have Evelyn's respect. But I can't deny you were better for her than I ever was. She's building an empire. She's everything I wanted to be and couldn't manage. She's also everything you hoped she'd be. At least one of us succeeded as her father. My throat tightens. Richard knew. He always knew. And some part of him buried under all that pain and resentment was proud. Margaret takes a shuddering breath and begins to speak, and this time there are no facades left to hide behind. I was 18 when I fell in love with Wallace. He was brilliant, passionate, and completely wrong for me according to my family. They'd arranged my marriage to Richard, wealthy, appropriate, boring. I refused Harvard and married Richard like a good daughter. I told myself I'd be happy. Her voice breaks on the last word. 7 years later, miserable and dying inside, I ran into Wallace at a business function. We had 1 month, one perfect stolen month, and then I went back to Richard because I was too afraid to blow up my life. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. Wallace wanted me to leave Richard to start over with him, but I was terrified of scandal, of losing everything. So I lied and said the baby was Richard's. She looks at me with tears streaming down her face, cutting tracks through her makeup. You were supposed to be my second chance at happiness. But instead, every time I looked at you, I saw my cowardice, my compromise, everything I'd given up. You had Wallace's intelligence, his determination, his potential. You were everything I could have been if I'd been braver. I sit silent, letting her speak, letting the truth finally flow freely after decades of being dammed up. She reaches the hardest part, and I can see it costs her everything to say it. When you got accepted to Harvard, my Harvard, the school I'd given up, I lost my mind. It wasn't rational. I sat at the kitchen table holding that letter, and all I could think was, if she goes, she'll become everything I should have been. She'll live my unlived life, and I'll have to watch it and know what I gave away. She wipes her eyes with a trembling hand. So I took the letter. I burned it, and I told Richard you'd decided to drop out of school to chase some boy. Richard believed me because it confirmed his worst opinions of you, that you were reckless, that you weren't his anyway, so why should he care? I destroyed your future to avoid facing my past. She looks at me with raw desperation, with the face of someone who's lost everything and has nothing left to lose. I can't undo it. I can't give you back those years. But I need you to know it wasn't about you. It was never about you. You were perfect, brilliant, deserving of everything. I was the one who was broken. I sit silently for a long time watching the water, watching boats pass in the distance, watching life continue while we grapple with truths that should have been spoken decades ago. Finally, I speak. You're right. You can't undo it. And I can't forgive it, not yet, maybe not ever. But I can. Acknowledge that you were human. Flawed, damaged, and human. You made terrible choices out of terrible pain. That doesn't excuse them, but it explains them. Margaret nods, not expecting more, knowing she doesn't deserve more. But I continue because this needs to be said too. Wallace told me to forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine. I'm working on it. But forgiveness isn't forgetting Mom. I'll never forget. What I'm willing to do is let go. I'm letting go of the anger because carrying it hurts me more than you. But we're not going to have some Hallmark movie reunion. We're not going to be close. What I can offer you is civil distance, honesty without cruelty, and maybe years from now, something resembling peace. I stand leaving the box of letters on the bench beside her. Let her keep them. Let her read Richard's words, his pain, his pride, his regrets. Let her make her own peace with the ghosts we all carry. I left my mother on that bench not with forgiveness, but with truth. And sometimes that's all you can give. A month after that conversation with my mother, Noreen does something that surprises me. She calls and asks me to read something before she publishes it. It's an essay. A long, raw, unflinching essay titled, "The Sister I Betrayed, a Confession." She submitted it to a major women's magazine and they want to run it as their cover story. I read it sitting at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside me. Noreen has told everything, the DNA secret she kept for 10 years, the way she participated in my ostracization, the hollow victory of being the perfect daughter. One paragraph in particular makes me stop and reread it 3 times. I was complicit in my sister's abuse because it kept the spotlight off me. I thought being perfect would make my father love me, but all it did was make me a prisoner. While my sister was building a life of authenticity, I was building a life of performance. She was free. I was trapped in a cage of approval seeking. I call her immediately. "Are you sure about this? Once it's out there, you can't take it back." "I'm sure," she says, and her voice is steady. "I need to own what I did, publicly, not just to you, but to everyone." The essay goes viral within hours of publication. It sparks conversations across social media about sibling dynamics, family scapegoats, the cost of perfectionism. Noreen is praised for her honesty, her courage, her willingness to expose her own failings. She's also criticized harshly, some people calling her complicit, asking why she didn't speak up sooner, questioning whether a public essay counts as real accountability. She accepts both the praise and the criticism with equal grace. "I deserve the criticism," she tells me. "And the praise isn't really for me anyway. It's for what the story represents." The essay also marks the beginning of a different kind of transformation. Noreen and James's marriage is formally annulled. They never consummated it after the wedding revelations, which makes the legal process simpler. James remains a friend and ally to both of us, but Noreen recognizes she needs time alone to discover who she is outside of everyone else's expectations. She moves out of the Grand Cole family home and into a modest 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that would horrify our mother. She takes a job at a women's nonprofit despite having access to a trust fund. She starts real therapy, not the image management kind our mother had pushed on her, but actual trauma therapy, with a specialist who doesn't care about maintaining appearances. For the first time in my life, she tells me over coffee one Saturday morning, I'm not trying to be anything for anyone. I'm just existing, figuring out what I actually like, what I actually believe. She cuts her hair short, stops wearing makeup daily, starts dressing for comfort instead of to impress. The transformation is subtle but profound. I watch my sister shed the performance of perfection like a snake shedding dead skin, and underneath is someone I'm starting to actually know. Her old friends from the socialite circles drift away uncomfortable with this new version of Noreen, who doesn't want to talk about charity galas and who wore jeans to lunch. But she finds new connections, real ones, with people who like her for who she is, not what she represents or who her family was. One evening in late May, exactly 1 year after that disastrous wedding, I ask her to meet me at my office. When she arrives, I have a proposal ready. I want you to co-found the Wallace Cole Foundation for Women with me, I say. You understand what it's like to be trapped by family expectations in a different way than I do. We need both perspectives, the scapegoat and the golden child, because both are prisons. Noreen's eyes fill with tears. Yes, absolutely yes. We spend the next month designing programs that address different types of family trauma. Scholarships for women whose education was sabotaged. Business grants for those who left abusive families and need help starting over. Therapy funds for those recovering from parental abuse. Everything we wished we'd had, we're now creating for others. Our first scholarship recipient is a 35-year-old woman named Maria, whose parents stole her college fund to pay off gambling debts. She's been working 2 jobs while taking community college classes at night. When we tell her she's received a full scholarship to finish her bachelor's degree, she breaks down crying. The story hits painfully close to home for both of us. At the Foundation's launch event in June, Noreen and I stand together at the podium in front of 200 donors, reporters, and community members. I speak about resilience. Noreen speaks about accountability. Together, we represent something powerful. The possibility of breaking generational cycles of sisters choosing each other over old patterns of building something better than what came before. After the event, as the crowd mingles and cameras flash, Noreen pulls me into a hug. Not the stiff performative hugs from childhood photo ops, but a real embrace between 2 women who've walked through fire and come out the other side together. I'm proud of you, I say into her shoulder. I'm proud of us, she responds. Later that evening, as we're packing up, Mr. Henderson approaches with an envelope I've never seen before. There's one more thing, he says. A codicil to Wallace's will that was only to be opened after the Foundation was established. We thought we'd found all the surprises in Wallace's will, but there was one final revelation that would change everything. Mr. Henderson hands me the envelope with a peculiar expression. This was to be delivered only after the Foundation was established. Wallace's final instructions. I open it expecting legal documents. Instead, I find a handwritten letter on expensive cream-colored stationery. The handwriting is elegant, feminine, unfamiliar. Dear Evelyn, I've waited long enough. It's time we met properly. I am your grandmother, and I've been watching over you your entire life, waiting for the moment you'd be ready to know the truth. Please come to tea this Saturday. We have 38 years to catch up on. Eleanor. The letter includes an address, Willowbrook Sr., living one of the most exclusive retirement communities in the state. I stare at the words until they blur. Grandmother, Eleanor. The elderly woman from the wedding who looked at me with such knowing compassion. Come with me, I say to Noreen. I can't do this alone. Saturday arrives too quickly. We drive to Willowbrook in nervous silence, pulling up to a beautiful estate that looks more like a luxury hotel than a retirement home. A staff member leads us to a private sitting room overlooking manicured gardens. And there she is. Eleanor Cole sits in a wingback chair, 91 years old, but radiating the kind of quiet power that comes from a life fully lived. She's impeccably dressed in a lavender suit with pearls at her throat, her white hair styled perfectly, her sharp eyes missing nothing. When she sees me, she stands with surprising grace and crosses the room. Before I can speak, she pulls me into an embrace. My beautiful granddaughter, she says, and her voice breaks on the words. You look so much like Wallace. Same eyes, same determined chin, same way of carrying yourself. She pulls back to look at me, her hands on my shoulders, and I see tears streaming down her face. Then she turns to Noreen. And you, she says warmly, you're part of this family too now, dear. Sisters should stay together. She gestures for us to sit, and a staff member brings in tea service with delicate china cups and fresh scones. It's surreal having tea with a grandmother I didn't know existed, while my world continues to expand in ways I never anticipated. I knew about you from the day you were born, October 1987. Eleanor begins pouring tea with steady hands. Wallace called me from the hospital in tears. He'd just learned he had a daughter he could never claim. We made a pact I would watch over you from afar, and he would do what he could without revealing himself. She reaches beside her chair and pulls out a leather-bound photo album. I documented everything I could. She opens it, and I see myself. A child version of myself I don't remember being photographed. There I am at what looks like an elementary school award ceremony, standing on stage receiving a certificate. And in the back of the auditorium, partially obscured, is Eleanor. "I was at your elementary school graduations, sitting in the back," she says softly. "At your high school debate championships. When you opened your first warehouse, I was in the crowd of well-wishers pretending to be a random supporter." Page after page reveals a ghost grandmother I never knew I had. Me at 8 receiving an academic award, Eleanor in the back. Me at 16 at a track meet, Eleanor in the stands wearing a hat and sunglasses. Me at 25 cutting the ribbon on my first business location, Eleanor in the crowd clapping. My eyes fill with tears. My throat closes. "You were there," I whisper. "Always." "Always," she confirms, reaching across to take my hand. Every milestone I could attend without raising suspicions. Every achievement. I was so proud, Evelyn. So incredibly proud. Noreen is crying too, looking at the photos of a sister she barely knew, protected by a grandmother she never met. "Why didn't you tell me?" I ask. "Why hide?" Eleanor's expression grows sad. "Wallace made me promise. He said if people knew about me, they'd start asking questions. Why would Wallace's mother take an interest in Richard Cole's daughter unless... People would figure it out, and the scandal would have destroyed your mother's marriage, and Richard's reputation when you were too young to weather it. So I stayed hidden, sent gifts through Wallace, and waited." She takes both my hands in hers, and her grip is surprisingly strong. "But you're strong now. Successful, independent, secure in who you are. The truth can't hurt you anymore. It can only complete you." She tells me about her will rewritten to leave her entire estate, $15 million, to the Wallace Cole Foundation. "Money I would have spent on my granddaughter privately will now help thousands of granddaughters. Wallace would have loved that." But then she leans forward, her eyes intense and loving in a way I've never experienced. "I'm here now for whatever time I have left. I want to know you really know you. Will you let me?" And something inside me that's been locked away for 38 years finally breaks open. For the first time in my life, I have a family member offering unconditional love. No strings, no judgment, no complex psychology or hidden resentments or painful history. Just pure, uncomplicated grandmother love. I break down completely, sobbing in a way I haven't since I was a child. Eleanor pulls me into her arms and I cry against her shoulder while she strokes my hair and makes soothing sounds. "I've got you now," she whispers. "I've always had you." We sit like that for a long time, grandmother and granddaughter finally together, finally allowed to love each other openly. Noreen sits beside us, her hand on my back, and for the first time in my life, I understand what family is supposed to feel like. I'd finally found the family I'd always deserved, just as I was about to step into the biggest moment of my life. That biggest moment arrives 5 years later in November 2030, at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. I'm 43 years old, standing backstage in a midnight blue gown waiting to receive the National Business Association's Woman of the Decade award. It's given to the female entrepreneur who has made the most significant impact on business and society over the past 10 years. When they called to tell me I'd won, I had to sit down, overwhelmed by the weight of what it meant. Cole Logistics is now worth $200 million. The Wallace Cole Foundation has helped over 10,000 women restart their lives. Women who had their education sabotaged, who fled abusive families, who needed a second chance to become who they were always meant to be. I've been profiled in Time magazine, featured as a case study in business schools, invited to speak at the United Nations about women's economic empowerment. Tonight is the culmination of everything I've built from nothing. As I wait for my cue, I think back to that 18-year-old girl leaving home with $200 and a suitcase, terrified and convinced she was worthless. I can barely remember being her. Sometimes it feels like a different lifetime, a different person entirely. When they call my name, I walk onto the stage and the audience rises as one. The standing ovation lasts nearly 2 minutes. I count, trying not to cry, trying to stay composed. I wait patiently, humbled by this moment as the applause finally dies down. I look out at the audience and see my family. Not the perfect, loving family I imagined as a child, but something real, complicated, and healing. Margaret, now 70, sits beside Noreen, 40, who holds hands with her girlfriend Jessica, a relationship she's finally comfortable being public about. Eleanor, miraculously still alive at 95, and sharp as ever, sits in the front row, beaming with pride. Even James is there now, a successful legal advocate for family law reform, working to protect children from the kind of family dysfunction we all survived. Noticeably absent are the society people from the old days. They stopped being relevant years ago, when my success made their approval unnecessary. Instead, the crowd tonight includes politicians, CEOs, foundation leaders, and most importantly, scholarship recipients from the Wallace Cole Foundation. Women who've rebuilt their lives and come here to honor the woman who helped them. Before the ceremony, one of them approached me, a young woman in her 20s who escaped an abusive family situation and now runs her own tech startup. "You gave me a chance when no one else would," she said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for existing." I hugged her tightly, thinking, this is why it all mattered. This is why every moment of pain was worth surviving. Now, standing at this podium with the award in my hands, I set aside the carefully crafted speech my PR team prepared. Instead, I speak from my heart. When I was 18 years old, my father told me I was nothing. I believed him. When I was 16, someone stole my acceptance letter to Harvard, and I believed I wasn't good enough for college. When I was a child, I learned to stay quiet, take up less space, apologize for existing. For years, I thought that was my truth. I paused, feeling emotion rise in my throat. But then, a man named Wallace Cole, my biological father, though I didn't know it then, taught me something revolutionary. Grace is not weakness. Strength is not cruelty. Success is not revenge. He taught me that the loudest rebellion against people who hurt you is becoming someone they never imagined you could be, and then using that power to lift others up, not tear people down. I looked directly at my family section, at Margaret and Noreen and Eleanor. My family hurt me. Deeply. They stole from me, lied to me, wished I didn't exist. For years, I wanted to destroy them the way they'd destroyed me. But then I learned something: hurt people. And the only way to break that cycle is to choose consciously and deliberately to be different, to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of hurt. My voice strengthens as I deliver the final message. To the women and girls out there who've been told they're not enough, who've had their dreams stolen, who've been made to feel invisible, you exist. You matter. Your potential is real. And the people who tried to dim your light, they're afraid of how bright you'll shine. So shine anyway. Build anyway. Love anyway. And remember, the best revenge is a life well lived and a legacy that outlasts the pain. The ovation that follows is thunderous, shaking the rafters of the Kennedy Center. I see Margaret crying openly, no longer hiding her emotions behind careful composure. Noreen is standing and cheering Jessica beside her, both of them beaming. Eleanor is dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and I can read her lips from here. That's my granddaughter. I stand there absorbing this moment, this validation, this proof that I survived and thrived and became someone who matters. Not because I destroyed the people who hurt me, but because I chose something better. But there was one more toast to give, one final full circle that would close the wound that started everything. That final toast comes on a perfect June day in 2040, 15 years after the wedding that shattered and rebuilt us all. Noreen is getting married again. She's 50 years old now, and this time she's marrying someone she genuinely loves. Maria, a brilliant woman who teaches at the Foundation's Leadership Academy. They met 3 years ago over a grant application and fell in love slowly, carefully building something real on a foundation of honesty. The venue is the Ashford Estate. The same ballroom, the same chandeliers, the same space where everything fell apart. But this time, Noreen chose it deliberately. I want to reclaim that night, she told me. I want to replace the worst memory with the best one. I'm her maid of honor. At 53, I stand beside my sister in a dress she chose for me, watching her marry the love of her life. Margaret, now 80 years old and moving slowly but with dignity, walks Noreen down the aisle. This time her tears are real and joyful. The guest list is smaller, more intimate, real friends, foundation staff, family we've chosen rather than inherited. Eleanor's photo sits at the altar alongside pictures of Wallace and Richard. She passed peacefully 2 years ago at 97, having lived long enough to see us heal. Before she died, she told me, "I got to know my granddaughter. That's all I ever wanted." Before the ceremony begins, I find Margaret sitting alone in a quiet corner staring at the ballroom. I sit beside her. We don't speak for a long moment. Finally, she says quietly, "This is where it all fell apart 15 years ago." I nod. This is also where it all started coming back together. Margaret takes my hand, a gesture that still feels tentative, even after years of slow, painful healing. "I've never said this properly. I'm sorry, Evelyn, not just for the letter, but for everything. For every time I looked at you and saw my failures instead of your light. For every opportunity I sabotaged because I was drowning in regret. For making you carry the weight of my choices." I squeeze her hand. "I know, Mom. I've known for a while. And I've made peace with it. Not forgotten, not excused, but peace." Her eyes well up. "You deserved better than me as a mother." My response is honest. Yes, I did. But I also deserved the chance to become who I am. And strangely, the pain made me stronger, more compassionate, more determined to break the cycle. So in a weird way, you gave me something just not what you intended to give. It's not perfect forgiveness, but it's real. And sometimes real is better than perfect. At the reception, Noreen asks me to give a toast. I stand looking around at the transformed space. Same chandeliers, same elegant ballroom, but the energy is completely different. Warm, loving, authentic. 15 years ago, I stood in the back of this room as a ghost, invisible, unwanted, convinced I had no place in my own family's story. My father said he wished I didn't exist. My family laughed, and I believed for a moment that maybe they were right. The room is silent, listening. But something miraculous happened that night. The truth came out, messy, painful, devastating truth, and it burned down all the lies we'd been living. My father embezzled from me. My mother sabotaged my education. My sister kept secrets. My real father had orchestrated my life from the shadows. It was a disaster. I pause, smiling. And it was the best thing that ever happened to us. I explain, because once we stopped pretending, we could start healing. Once we named the wounds, we could begin treating them. It took years. It took therapy, hard conversations, countless tears, and more forgiveness than I thought I was capable of. But we did it. We broke the cycle. I look at Noreen. My sister, who once participated in my exclusion, now stands beside me as my partner in helping other women find their voices. She chose authenticity over approval, and in doing so, found real love. I look at Margaret. My mother, who stole my future out of jealousy and pain, now volunteers at the foundation, helping other mothers break free from generational expectations. She can't give me back what she took, but she's giving other daughters what she wishes she'd given me. I address everyone. To the family we're born into with all their flaws, wounds, and inherited pain, and to the family we choose, the family we become when we do the hard work of healing. To second chances and second weddings. To late blooming truths and hard-won grace. To sisters who rebuild broken bonds. To mothers who learn to let go. To fathers who tried in their insufficient ways. I raise my glass. And to Wallace Cole and Richard Cole and Eleanor Cole, 3 parents, 3 kinds of love, 3 parts of my story. They're not here, but they're woven into everything I've become. The room raises glasses with me. 15 years ago, they wished for one daughter, perfect, compliant, easy. But life gave them something better. Life gave them a woman who survived, who thrived, who learned that you don't have to choose between strength and grace, you can embody both. A woman who knows her worth isn't determined by who loved her or didn't. A woman who understands that the best revenge is building a life so authentic, so purposeful, so full of meaning, that the people who tried to dim her light become irrelevant. I look at Noreen, tears streaming. To my sister who taught me that redemption is possible, that people can change, and that sometimes the family that hurt you can also be part of your healing. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for being brave enough to face what we were and become something better. The room erupts. Noreen crosses and hugs me. Margaret joins us, and 3 generations stand together, imperfect, wounded, but healing. Later, I step onto the terrace where I stood 15 years ago, invisible and hurt. I pull out Wallace's worn letter and read, "Build something better than what we built." I whisper, "I did, Dad. We all did." And I walk back inside where my complicated, beautiful, hard-won family is waiting. And that's where Evelyn's journey comes to a close. From the daughter they wished away, to the woman who built an empire on grace and resilience. Her story reminds us that the families we're born into don't have to define us, and that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well and lifting others as we rise. If Evelyn's story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you had to choose between holding on to anger or finding peace? What does forgiveness mean to you? And do you think Evelyn made the right choices? Your perspective matters, and I read every single comment. This community thrives on the wisdom and experiences you share with each other. If this is your first time here, welcome. I share stories of resilience, redemption, and the complicated truth about family dynamics. These aren't just tales of revenge served cold. They're about real people finding their way back to themselves despite everything trying to break them. If that resonates with you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And if you made it all the way to the end of Evelyn's 25-part journey, thank you. Thank you for investing your time, your attention, and your heart into this story. You're the reason these stories matter. Until next time, remember, you are seen, you matter, and your story isn't over yet.